I packed my drums away. I didn't touch my drums for a couple of years. Literally after that day, I packed them up and that was it.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, feel free to support the podcast if you've been listening for a while. You can sign up on my Patreon, patreon.com/thiswasthescene for $1 a month, and we will be best friends. Congress of Cow was my first band, which eventually changed into Lanemeyer. It consisted of myself, Mr. Chris Barker, who did Congress Cow, Lanemeyer, and then Day at the Fair, Jeff Demiceli, who I'm interviewing, who did Congress Cow and then Modesty Panel, and Andrew Spratt, who's done a bunch of musical ventures after his Congress Cow days. This band is 100% crucial in me finding the punk scene because this is where we started to play local shows and my eyes were opened to what was going on. It's such a pinnacle part of my life, and I'm so excited that I got to get Jeff to do this interview because I haven't talked to this dude in fucking forever. And a couple weeks ago, I randomly get this email, and it's from him. It's the subject line is "We Lift," which was one of the Congress of Cow songs. Was one of my favorite Congress of Cow songs. And he was just like, "Hey man, I just stumbled upon the podcast. Want to see what's up? Just saying hello." And I immediately replied, "I'm like, bro, you have to get on this interview." And he was a little hesitant, thinking like no one really wants to hear this. And who knows, not a lot of people know who the band is, but there have been a few episodes that I've stated throughout the history of this podcast where I'm like, this one's clearly just for me and maybe a small handful of people to listen to, because this is a conversation that I just wanted to have, and I'm fucking fired up that we got to have it, because there was a crucial point where when Jeff left the band that we got Sean and Alan and we changed it to Lanemeyer, and it was kind of fuzzy how that all happened. So this is what me and Jeff talk about through this very, very long conversation. And that conversation probably happens about midway through. So the beginning is us catching up and learning about how we got together as a band, but then we eventually get into how we broke up, how we was in the Modesty Panel, and all that good stuff. So it's very long, but I'm super stoked for this one. Luckily, I got Jeff on the Skype, and this is what we talked about. Lifting weights together, how he started playing drums, how he connected with Mr. Barker, practicing in his parents' basement, his thoughts on double bass pedals, his feelings about Sean from Lanemeyer, the show where we got unplugged by the sound guy, how we both remember parting ways, seeing Warped Tour at Action Park in '96, meeting Blink-182 at that Warped Tour show right before they exploded, playing a Modesty Panel with Mr. Jay Blanda, and a shit ton more. Since this is a very long episode, I'm just going to jump into it. So if you want to support the podcast, you can do the Patreon thing, you can buy some merch, and that's it. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who loves some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. This is the first time I've talked to you since, what, 2008?
The last time I think we saw each other was probably, it's got to be, I was thinking about this the other day. I think it's got to be around that time because I went to Maxwell's to see a Lanemeyer reunion show and Weston played.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, so I don't know circa whenever that was, I guess 2008. And I remember seeing, I think I saw you and Chris out in the front because it was funny because I had never actually seen Weston play live before. That was the first time.
Really?
Yeah, it was the first time I ever saw him. I think there was like two other occasions back when we were in the band together to go see them. And both times something randomly happened and I didn't get to see them.
So that doesn't make any sense to me because we played a show with them at Boone and Elks Lodge, or I think it was the Knights of Columbus at the time. Remember
that? Okay, so here's the side of the story. That was the first time that was the second time I think I was going to go see him. I think I was supposed to go out to PA with Heiner at some point, and then somehow I got uninvited or I didn't get to go or something happened. At the Boot Knights of Columbus, we were going back in. I was dating Lois at the time, and like we're walking the sidewalk back to go see Weston play, and she tripped over the curb and like messed up her ankle, and I wound up taking her home and not getting to see Weston until 2008.
I was gonna say it would probably had to do with you dating Lois.
This is gonna be half the podcast right here.
You know what's really funny? Wait, you know what's really funny though? She so Lois so I was part of the Morris County Chamber of Commerce for a really long time because I've been working for myself for since like 2006. And I used to do this thing called Tab, which is a mastermind group with business owners. And then I quit that 2014, I think, and she was in it. So she ended up getting connected to me because of this guy Chris Lipper who runs it. So she emailed me a couple of years ago, and she's like, "I'm in the Morris County Chamber. I'm in Tab now, and like Chris Lipper said he used to be in it, and I need some animation work done." I was like, "Wow, this is a small world, dude." So she's actually like kind of a client of mine,
Oh, okay, cool.
which is just fucking super crazy, but like.
It is nuts the way things change and how you randomly will run into people after years and just be like the connections and the dots. How they all kind of lead back in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it's crazy too because so everyone listening, Jeff has always been was really big into like lifting. Are you still in that? Are you still like into that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most important things to me is just taking care of myself.
So me and Jeff have known each other since my God, we were in elementary school. We went to White Rock
Yeah,
together, and
yeah,
then I remember going to I think it might have been Adam Boyce's or your birthday party because you were big into bowling when you were really young, right?
yeah. I used to bowl at Sparta Lanes
That
every
was it.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I remember like you had a glove or something like when we were at this birthday party. And
I had my own ball with the wrong name on it because my parents were too cheap to buy me my own bowling ball.
what was the
So
name on it?
we got like a 50% discount because the name was spelled wrong on the ball.
That is fucking funny. So me and Jeff know each other since elementary school, and then we again like elementary school, middle school, and then high school. And so we were in high school. Me and Barker started this like we were starting to play together, and we'll kind of like I'm kind of jumping all over the place because I'm like my brain is just there's so many things like firing off right now.
It's been so long, so this is going to be all over the place.
Which is great. I mean, I talked to Granick for 3 hours, so I won't hold you on for that long. But that was such a great conversation. But
Oh,
like,
I don't mind.
but you and me, I remember. I think it was because we were in the band together. But you were like, I got this gym in my basement, and I was like, I want to start working out. So I think I went to your house maybe 3 times, and I got there at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and we would lift because you had a bench, and I would just follow your lead, and I was like, I can't wait to keep doing this. And then I fell off of it, but then you stayed with it forever because you were just like really into it, and like that's always so it's like you never gave that up.
Yeah, it has been the one constant since I've been in high school. I remember, it kind of goes back to, it's a traditional. I mean, Henry Rollins has the thing about the iron. It's like the not poem but short story, and it's funny because I only heard that like 2 years ago, and when I heard it, I was like, wow, that is like pretty much exactly. I couldn't put it into better words. It's always there. It's a constant. 200 pounds is 200 pounds, no matter what. If you can't do it, you can't do it. It's all on you, and it's always been a gigantic stress relief for me. It kind of started in middle school. I got picked on a lot. Even into high school, freshman year, I knew Rob Heiner through like at the end of middle school and then like into freshman year because we were somehow always in gym together. So you remember how like in gym you used to have to sit in those lines before gym started and then
Yeah,
you would do like a warm up. So Rob and I were always there. And Rob actually was at that time, I don't know if he still is, but like at that time he was into college football. And I was really into college football as well too. So we used to bet. And he used to always bet me and he would always take Penn State and I didn't like Penn State. So, and I would always lose. So you bet like $10 or $5 and I would always lose. And I have to bring cash to gym with me to pay off Rob. But even remember at that time, like a couple of the guys that he was friends with, I think were kind of like the badasses per se in like middle school and early high school.
yeah, like Nick Van Houten and
Yeah, yeah. And I used to get picked on. I was kind of like very nerdy. I never had a lot of friends. I was in the band, like the school band, all the way from fourth grade playing the saxophone up until freshman year of high school.
that's right.
It just like it got to the point where I don't know what changed, but I was like, you know what? I want to try this and sort of transform myself because I'm tired of getting picked on. And that's kind of where it started. It's funny that you mentioned that because I had forgot there was a few times where you had talked to me about it because I was into it a little bit. And then I played football junior year, and then I got into it more and more, as I've gotten older. But I still have, when I played on the football team, they gave us these yellow folders. I don't even remember the weight room in the high
Yeah.
school.
No,
And it had a yellow folder. I
yes.
have your yellow folder with all of your workout stuff in it because you somehow got one of the football folders, but you didn't play football. You were just like, you were trying to work out and get bigger.
Yeah.
My question is for the sort of the same reasons that I got into it originally. I still have it downstairs. It's literally like where I have a workout room in my house now downstairs in the basement. And as one of the things that I've kept over the years, it's actually yours. It has your name on the front and all your like weights and everything in it.
Oh my God, dude.
It's sitting in my basement. Yeah, it says Doyle on the front. You were doing it for a bit because you were allowed to go to the weight room in Jefferson if you didn't play sports. Like it was like after school. And I remember you used to go in there, and I started going in there because of football, but I had the bench in my basement, and I had like completely forgot about the fact that you had come to my house and then you just like stopped.
Well, what happened was because I was always a fat kid, and
Okay.
and when I hit high school, like same thing with you, man. I got picked on like big time in middle school and elementary school, and like I just broke my leg when I was in fourth grade, and then I just ate all summer long, and I got really fat, and I couldn't burn it off until I was in high school because then I just had a growth spurt. So when I hit that growth spurt, I was like mad skinny. So I'd go to your house because you were like, I'm gonna get into it because you're like, my dad and his buddies used to do this shit back in the day in the city or something, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like we should do that. And then I remember we'll eventually talk about music and Conquer Scout, but like
Yeah, right.
I remember the first time we did that, you made a protein shake after, and I drank it and I threw it all up because it was just too
It's
much.
disgusting.
Yeah, no, it was like it wasn't because it was gross. It was like I just couldn't handle that much milk and protein, I guess. And I remember I chugged it and had to run into your bathroom and throw it all up.
That's hilarious. Yeah, because those were like that
Wow.
was like the little cheap bench that you can get with the concrete weights.
Yeah.
And I think I got a bunch of like the concrete wrapped in the plastic form.
Uh-huh.
And I got a bunch of them from my next door neighbor who had gone to Jefferson. Like he was like 4 or 5 years older than me. And he's like, here, you could have these. And like I was lifting and doing whatever I could find. I just want to be big and strong because I'm tired of people picking on me.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was a few kids that were like that. And by the time I hit like the end of junior year and early senior year, I just remember it being like a totally different ball game. Those same people, they didn't even bother with me. They just left me alone.
I remember that. Yeah, like you. Yeah, there was always that. There's always that group of kids who gets picked on. But I
Yeah.
do remember, like, yeah, like you got picked on. Bob. So I'm still friends with like Chris and Bob and Heiner and Woosley and Price and Justin and like and Boyce even like I've talked to him like here and there. And yes, yeah, this weekend, Michael texted me and he goes, "This reminds me." He goes, "I was looking up." He goes, he said something about Sand and Fuse,
Okay.
and he goes, "This reminded me of the time that Sand and Fuse tased Brian Naglicki in science class." And I guess Brian would always punch Sandin in the arm every time Mr. Crespo turned around. So Sandin was like, "You're gonna regret it. Keep it up." And I guess
You finally cracked.
he fucking brought in a homemade taser, and Bob's like, and because Bob was in class, fucking Crespo turns around, Brian punches him in the arm. So Sandin pulls the shit out of his bag and shocks Brian and knocks him off his seat. And Crespo turns around and he's like, "What happened here?" And then Sandin tells him the story. And I guess, and then what did he say? Crespo like kind of like said, "Good job," and he's like, "Brian, get off the floor," or something like that.
It's like the hard lesson. Like it's funny. Like that's interesting. I'd be interested to see how that would go down in high school at this point or middle school at this point.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, are you still teaching?
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah. Yeah, I teach engineering design.
That's right. Yeah, you've been doing that for now for.
It's been a bit. I taught at a school and then I did the whole thing with Jay, Blanda, Jay Jerkoff, I guess, but I call him Jay.
Yeah,
Uh,
Mazepin.
and yeah, we did that with Jay and Brian Granick. So Jay, Brian, and I did that for a little while. And then when that was over, I worked in industry for a while. So I did engineering for a while, and then eventually I went back into teaching. So it's been about 10 years at this point, I'm back into it.
Yeah, because you remember when we saw each other, I think you had said you left the industry because you hated it. Like you liked teaching better. Like you liked the skill that you had, but being at the job that you were at, you think you just like despised it or something.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, like, unless I wanted to become a professional engineer and get my license and take the test and do all that stuff, which I really had no interest in doing it, I quickly realized that there was a ceiling for me in the professional world
Uh-huh.
where I would not be able to get past a certain point because I wasn't willing to do that. It was a lot of the same thing over and over again, and traffic and driving and hours of stuff, and I just decided I wasn't going to be able to go to where I wanted to be, and also I would never be in a position where I would have the autonomy that I have now, which is huge for me. I've always been very much I need to be able to do what I want to do kind of thing.
Yeah, man. I mean, actually, I don't even. So everyone listening, obviously, at this point, you realize that me and Jeff have known each other forever because we just talked about it. But he was the drummer in Congress of Cow, which we're going to talk about, and then we talk about Jeff in two interviews. Actually, you've come up a lot.
It's funny you say that because I feel like I am so in the scheme of what I remember, I feel so highly insignificant to what everybody else sort of did. Or when I reached out to you, I randomly came across it. It came up. Something came up on my feed. Somehow it brought me to your podcast, and I was like, Mike, oh, he's got a podcast. I listened to Jay's because obviously that's who I would figure I have the connection. And I listened to yours and Chris's because again, that's who I have a connection to. It came up in the thing, and it was like it was fun because it was over the course of like 3 or 4 days. I'd catch it like working out in the morning or whatever, driving to work, and then I was like, that's really fun. So that's when I emailed you.
Yeah.
I was like, thanks for the memories. I appreciate that because in what I do, I don't tend to meet a lot of people. It's rare in my life where I will meet somebody that has any idea what any of this is all about or was about. It is so rare. When I really appreciate when I find that, or I find a person that's like, hey, do you remember this? And I'm like, oh my goodness, because it was, I'm not going to say it was like completely underground, but it wasn't mainstream by any sense of the.
Oh, totally. Well, that's funny that you said that because you should really listen to Granix because we talk about Mossy Panel and we talked about because I asked him a question in that too. I was like, I heard a rumor that when you guys were recording an album, Jeff like unloaded his savings account to record an album, and Brian was like, "Yeah, that's totally accurate." I was like,
Yep,
"Holy
yeah,
shit.
100% accurate.
Wow."
Yeah, we'll get into that.
All right, cool, man. Well, so God, dude, it's like I just like I want to balance this because I want to catch up because I haven't talked to you in so long. Like I love talking about the high school days too, and well, the funny thing, the reason I brought up the whole working out thing is again, and Lois is a big part of this too because you guys were dating, and that was pretty much my memory of like why you quit the band, like Congress of Cow.
That was well. I mean, well, do you want to talk about how it all began, or is that
No,
like?
we're gonna get there, but you're
Okay.
definitely gonna kick that. But it was funny because when you guys kept dating after high school, and then because you guys were both big into personal training, is where it was connecting the dots here. But she is a personal trainer now, like she has a business around that. So it's crazy that like those things that were planted in high school, like people like took that and ran with it. So she did that. I've been working for myself since 2004 because I got the taste of being in a band, which was just me working for myself. And I was like, well, I don't want to write music anymore, but I definitely don't want to work for people. So I'm going to like do something creative, which I've done for 16 years. So then here we are talking on a fucking podcast about the late 90s punk scene, which you think you didn't have that much of an impact in. But like, again, we're going to talk about how you did, Jeffrey.
Well, thanks, Dad. I appreciate that.
Okay, so I asked people in the past what got into music, but I skipped that now, and I want to talk about the scene. But I know the answers to these questions, but what I'm interested in is like me and Chris got together. Chris was always playing guitar, and then I ended up playing bass because Bob didn't want his, and I had borrowed, I think Joe Antonucci's. I think I borrowed his bass. He had this blue Yamaha. I borrowed it and learned tablature because Chris wrote it down for me, and I loved it. And then Bob had bought a bass because he wanted to play bass with Chris, and just realized that it wasn't his thing. And then I bought that bass from him. So me and Chris started playing. He would write songs, we'd play them, and we'd do face-to-face covers. And also one day he goes, "Hey, dude, I got a drummer. I think I found a drummer." And that was you. It's like, how did that start? With like, how did you guys connect about that?
It's funny because I don't exactly remember. I vaguely remember I used to bang on everything. So the story of me, I grew up playing the piano. I took piano lessons from the time I was like 5. My parents bought a piano. Somehow when I was like 4 or 5, I started playing Mary Had a Little Lamb on the piano without ever taking a lesson. It was just sort of a natural thing for me. And my parents saw that, and they were like, okay, you're going to take lessons. So I took piano lessons. And then fourth grade was the grade you got to pick your instrument. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes. Yeah, saxophone.
Yeah, like so. Yeah, so we picked the saxophone and I played, and it was so easy to me to play the saxophone compared to playing the piano. As a musician, generally speaking, that's pretty much everybody says if you learn how to play the piano, playing any other instrument is like you already know half of it. It's just how do you breathe into this thing, or how do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like what are the fingerings for the notes? But you already have the theory and stuff already ingrained into you. And when I was like 9 or 10, my two older cousins, I think my older cousin Greg is probably 8 or 10 years older than me. My cousin Corey is like 6 or 7 years older than me. We used to go to their house up in New York. They were both drummers and they were totally into like the heavy metal scene. So I would like go to their house. I was like 10 and Corey's like 16, 17. He's got the posters on the wall of like Metallica and the Quiet Riot, like with like the guy in the mask. I'm like 10 and I'm like scared as out of my mind of like going into his room. In their garage, they had a drum set on a riser. Every time we would go, it would be some sort of holiday and they would have their friends there, which like every time we had a holiday at my house, my parents would never let me have friends over, and they were always playing, and both of them were amazing drummers, like amazing metal drummers. And I had no idea what the music was whatsoever. All I would do is just sit by the side of the garage door and just stare at them playing the drums. That is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm sitting there, I can play the piano.
I'm the complete opposite of what you guys
Yeah,
are
yeah,
doing.
right. And I played the alto saxophone in like middle school band at the time. And I just remember every holiday, like Christmas or Easter or whatever, like just going up to their house and they were playing and they were just randomly jamming with like 6 other guys with basses and guitars. And I'm like, I will never be this cool. Like, this is the coolest thing. And I remember coming home one holiday and saying to my parents, like, I want to play the drums. And they're like, well, we've already bought you a saxophone. You're not going to play drums. I remember being in band and just like every time there was like 5 minutes before or after band, I would always try and go to the drum kit that was there and play it. And I literally I would bang in my parents' silverware drawer. I would just open the drawer and I would pick 2 forks and just start playing. And my parents used to yell at me all the time, bang on the table, whatever the case may be. I was like sort of faux playing the drums before I ever got a drum set. And I know this is a whole roundabout way of getting to meet Chris, which
It's totally fine. No, that's perfect.
shorter answer is I don't even remember. But like, I wanted a drum set for that while, and just seeing my cousins play, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I was like, totally, I have to play classical music on the piano, and I was like, oh, it's just so terrible. But I did it anyway. So I remember 8th grade or freshman year, I went to my parents. It was freshman year because I was like 14, and I went to my parents and I was like, "It's been a couple of years. I said I want to play the drums. You're not going to let me play the drums in the band because I have the saxophone. I want to buy a drum set." My parents were both. We all grew up pretty much the same way. It's not like we were starving, but it's not like we had a ton of extra money to just like go buy a $1,200 drum kit. My parents said, "Listen, if my dad was the big one because he didn't want the noise." And he was like, listen, you go get a job, you work for it, you can buy a drum set, but we are not buying you a drum set. We kind of made this deal, my dad and I think I like just turned 15 and I'm like, I think you had to be 16 to work. Remember you used to have to
Yeah.
like
Working papers.
from the high school. You had to be 16. So I'm like, what can I do? So I like bugged my mom, and my mom was one of those moms who knew everybody
Yeah.
in town. Well, you know that. My mom was that mom. Like it was the reason why I was always so shy as a kid, because my mother just did the talking for all of us. So
Yep.
she's like, there's this lady, what was her name? Beverly. and she owns the Jefferson Inn. Do you remember this Jefferson Inn?
Yeah, it like never could figure out how to make money. Kenny Friedman, he lived up
Yeah, right next to
right
it.
next to it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, she's like, Beverly needs a new dishwasher because this other kid named
Oh
Jeff
my God, that's right.
is like graduating high school this year, and he was the prep cook and the dishwasher. You couldn't get a job at like the A&P or anything because you weren't 16 yet. Man, I really wanted the drum set really, really bad. So I remember I rode my bike from my house to the Jefferson Inn. It was that very odd place, like had that huge building in the back
Creepy as
that was
fuck.
like abandoned. The restaurant was on the side, but like it was only local people knew about the restaurant. But yeah, like I did that and I saved the money. And then when I turned 16, that wasn't when the A&P like did the whole reface.
And you got the fucking job there. I remember that because you got the job there and I had applied and I didn't get hired. So I ended up working at the Ding Dong Deli.
That's right. Like a whole bunch of people got jobs at the A&P because it was brand new. And then like 2 months later, like, everybody had quit. But yeah, I saved up and then I bought a Pearl Export. I still have it. It's in my basement.
Do you really?
I still have it.
Do you
Yep.
still have Oscar?
I still have Oscar. Yep.
Wow.
So the green Pearl Export, and because it was green, it was like a special order. So I had to wait 3 weeks. You remember Mark Seeley?
Oh yeah.
He played the drums and he was a good drummer. Like he was one of those kids that was always the drummer. I remember Mark being always the drummer in our grade and Steve Weir, that's it. Yeah. And I remember Steve always being the drummer in the other one. And I always remember, or I look back on that and remember me not being the drummer. Like I remember those guys were like, they're the drummers like of that grade. And I was like, always wanted to be the person that people would come to and say, hey, can you play drums in our band? But I never had drums. I had to wait 3 weeks. So I went over to Seeley's house and I actually bought a snare drum for him for $50, just a regular like snare. I had gotten all of the hardware and all the cymbals, but I had to wait like 3 or 4 weeks because that mint green color was like a special order kind of thing. I had a little splash cymbal. I used to take the little splash cymbal and the snare, and I put the splash cymbal in in the holiday time, you get that popcorn with the like 3 popcorns in it, and it's like a tin. So I kept the lid and I put the splash cymbal underneath it because it kind of sounded like a hi-hat. And I used to listen to like the early punk records, like for me anyway, for what I had. And I would just sit there and practice before I ever had a full drum kit. I remember Ryan Headley used to come over like before I had the drum kit, and we used to just jam like that. I'm playing a hi-hat with a splash cymbal and an upside down popcorn can lid and a real snare drum, and he was a great guitar player.
Yeah, he was really good. I can't believe that your dad. I mean, I can understand why he didn't want you to get a drum kit because you're playing on this makeshift kit, which must have sounded awful.
It was probably the best playing I ever did.
I remember you were telling me about that because like when Chris will figure out like how he finally talked to you. I think it was did he just see you playing the kit at the school? Because you said you would just go and play there in the band.
I don't remember Chris was Chris in band in middle school?
He was taking
guitar lessons?
Well, in high school, I mean, he would take theory.
Yeah,
for some reason, yeah, he was in a music class that I forget what it was. It was like where they were teaching them about music recording and things like that.
Right. And I was only in the band up until freshman year, and then I was too cool for band. After freshman year, I started working out. I'm too cool for band. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a cool kid. I wanted to fit in. I quit sophomore year. I vaguely remember being in the cafeteria around Chris or you guys or something. And I was like banging on that. Like I was literally banging. Like people used to tell me to stop all the time.
Yeah.
Like, and I was banging on the table because I always had a song. In my entire life, I have always had a song in my head almost every day. And I was always trying to like figure out, okay, when I get a drum set, what are the mechanics of my 2 hands and my feet? And how do I figure that out? So once I get a drum set, I already have the muscle memory to just like literally start playing. I was practicing for like 2 years before I ever had a drum kit. And I remember it sort of started coming together from middle school and then I think at the high school because I always used to just get my saxophone, just put it on my chair and then like go right to the drum kit and start playing until I got yelled at either before or after band was over. I think I was doing that in the cafeteria like junior year,
Yes.
beginning of junior year. And then I think somehow Chris was like, do you have a drum kit or you're playing? And I was like, no, but I'm going to be getting one really soon because I was saving up my money and I was really close. Like, I think Chris basically said something to the effect of, oh, well, once you get a drum kit, just let me know. Within like a week or two, I went down to Richie's Music off of 46. I finally saved up enough money from just working to buy the kit, and I put the kit in. And then they told me like, oh, it's going to be another 3 or 4 weeks if you want the mint green color. And I was like, oh, like, and I remember it like delaying another month. And I think Chris came back to me and was like, oh, did you get it yet? I was like, yeah, but I had to order it. I think like the first day I got it, Ryan Headley came over. We put it together, and then he and I started jamming in the basement. Probably the next day or the next week or whatever, I went to Chris. I was like, I have a drum kit, and he's like, oh, I'm playing with Mike, and I knew you, Chris. I didn't know as much, and I was like, wow, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. Going back to the time where I was 10 and seeing my cousins just play in their garage. Wow, I actually could be part of something like that. That is the coolest thing. And at the same time, like within that sort of time frame, I was still trying to be part of the cool crowd per se. I was just trying to find myself. That sophomore, junior year, I was trying to figure it out. I was working out, I was playing sports, I was playing football, playing baseball, but I've always been into rock and roll music, and I've always had a song in my head, and I always played the piano, and I was always just sort of just generally naturally, I guess, good at music. So it was kind of like I had both of those things, and then I was just trying to figure myself out, and it just sort of came to pass that I finally got the drum set, and then Chris was like, all right, cool, you're gonna play the drums. And then three of us, and then I think Andy came in like pretty much right off the bat.
Yeah, like from what I remember, it's so funny, man. On all these interviews, everyone I've talked to, there's something about when they were younger, and then they always wanted to do something, and they kind of just eventually, when they like were in the band or produced music, whatever it was, it's like if you go back to the beginning, they just wanted it so bad. So it's funny that you were like, I really want like a group of friends, and I really want to just play drums, and both of those happened exactly the same time. Because basically, like once, and I'll talk about like when we first practiced. I think I kind of remember it, but once you were in the band, like you just started hanging out with us all the time. So it's like we already had Chris was kind of establishing this group on his own where he was friends with Luch, and he was friends with me separately, and then Bob separately, and then Heiner, and he kind of became this magnet where he would be the reason we'd all start hanging out together and form that group. And then it's just like the same thing with you. So then that's how that all formed basically.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much for me, I was sort of my entire life has been I like so many different things, and a lot of times it's almost a detriment because I'm not just focused on one specific thing. I loved playing music, and I loved performing and doing those things, and at the same time I was totally into like I was a good student.
Yeah, you were in the honor roll and shit, right?
Yeah, for a long time. I mean, like, well, and that was sort of my parents. It was sort of I always had the capability of being academically smart. Whether I chose to work hard or not was another story. But basically, my entire life, unless I got an A or B, I would get grounded.
Yeah.
So if I got a report card and it came home and I got like a C on a report card, I'd be grounded for like a week. I would do enough to get the A or B up until I met you guys.
Well, that was the thing too, because I thought that when we started playing, I don't know if I could be making this up, but I always thought there was a rule like you had to be doing well for your mom to let
Yes.
you still play
Yeah.
in the band.
Yeah, that was 100%. I had to get A's and B's from the start of when we started. That was junior year when it was fall of junior year that we started playing. Was it that year or the winter? We used to play in my basement all the time.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna talk about that, dude. That was like one of my favorite things.
I still got pictures from a time. They're up in my room. I'll have to scan them, send them to you. There's some pretty funny stuff. You remember when Chris did the like Janet Jackson pose? He took his shirt off, has his hands over his head, and we put a blanket behind him, and somebody else is like holding his chest.
No.
What was that? The Rolling Stone cover of Janet Jackson. I got
It was
pictures
her
of
album
that.
cover.
Yeah, and it was like this whole juxtaposition meeting you guys and then learning about all of this other music that outside of Green Day, coming out with Dookie in '94 and just completely blowing my mind musically. It was like, meeting you guys and then sort of going, I was late to the party. You guys were all ahead of me. And then,
Not kind of like Chris had started figuring it out, But I think when you and I started listening to that music, I think we kind of came in at the same time because playing in the band was really the thing that got me to like any punk rock. Remember, I just had the Tool sticker on my bass.
Yeah, on the black bass. Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and Chris and everybody used to give you a hard. I never gave you a hard time about it. Everybody else giving you a hard time
Oh,
about
always. Yeah, I've told that story where I had to I instead of I had it on the front of the bass, and I think we were gonna play the Boot and Elks show, not the one with Weston, but it was everyone. It was when I think I had dyed my hair pink. No, I had like the visor on, whatever the fuck it was. We were about to play the show, and I think Andy walked up to me and he's like, "Hey man, you can't have that sticker on the front of your bass."
I like looking back now. It's so funny the rules, right?
Well, it's like the punk rock thing is to not follow rules, but then you show up to it and they're like, "Okay, here's the rule book." You're like, "Wait a minute, this
Yeah,
is what?"
like what the hell? And it's funny because I always felt sort of awkward when we started actually going to shows. I didn't really dress like you guys per se. I was just Jeff, like, and I remember going to shows and I'd be carrying in the drums, or whatever equipment. And I remember people just like looking at me like, who is this kid? This kid does not fit the mold of, everybody else here. I remember there's a few times it was sort of gratifying where like, we would play and then a random kid would come up to me, guy or girl, and say like, wow, you're a really good drummer. And I would be like, oh, thanks. It was kind of like, I told you so. And not that I was a very good drummer at that point. I wouldn't characterize myself as that at that point. It was always sort of a small, as I understand the rules, you're not supposed to judge anybody. but, but as I walk into it, it's kind of like getting judged pretty hard because I was clearly, at least visually, not part of that.
Well, I think the same time though, like that's on the same time that this is such a stupid small thing, but I remember borrowing Bob's Vans and
Yeah.
I loved them so much, and that's and then he had like a striped shirt. I was like, "Oh wow, I think I borrowed one of his striped shirts." So that was the first time I wore a air quotes punk outfit or punkish outfit, and then that's where I just went down that avenue. And that was like all the time when we were all figuring out what we wanted to be. So even that small thing like getting the Vans, then you got them. I remember you always rocked the Vans. Yep. And that was our like us dipping our toe in the water of becoming this like again punk rock kid.
I think Rob gave me a pair of jeans. Heiner gave me a pair of jeans. They were just baggier. They weren't like
Yeah.
gigantic. They weren't skater jeans. I was never a skater.
You had the tight jeans back then though, weren't you?
Yeah, I
The
had the
tight
tight
jeans?
jeans. Yeah, I was rocking the tight jeans before anybody before anybody else was doing it.
Yeah, before they became cool in like the
They were
early
just bigger.
2000s.
They were just like more roomy, but they weren't like the gigantic skater pants because I didn't skate. I remember you guys would skate, like yeah,
Aggressive rollerblading,
yeah, exactly. Inline skating.
inline skating,
Yeah.
grinding curbs.
Yeah, you guys used to do that for like a short time. Everybody rollerbladed, but like skated. There was less of the skateboarding thing. I don't know. I could be
I think
totally
of it
off
like
track.
this though. Like that is kind of like if you're gonna get into music, if you're gonna pick up a guitar is way cooler than a bass, and it's a lot harder to learn. A bass is you could start playing it right away, and it's easier to learn. It's the same thing like rollerblading and skateboarding. Like
Okay, all right.
you
I
could
got
put
the
on
analogy.
skate. That's why I think a couple of us got it because Heiner got into it first, and then Bob, and then we got into it. But that was like our thing. Even though anytime we were out and like skateboarders showed up, I was like, oh, we look like fucking dorks.
Yeah, like it's funny because I never knew that, but it was funny. I never had the coordination or the balance. My one and only skateboarding story was I was probably like 8, and I lived in White Rock. My driveway was like a little bit of hill, but White Rock Boulevard is a pretty busy road. And I remember going down the hill on like a random Kmart bright pink skateboard one day, and my dad was watching me. I literally had no balance, no control. I get to the bottom of the driveway. There's a car coming down the road, and I'm scared out of my mind. I fall off the skateboard, scratch up my elbows, my hands, whatever. The skateboard goes into the road, and the car runs over the skateboard.
Holy shit.
I had bailed way before that, but like I kicked the skateboard out in front of me. I just tore myself up, and the car just ran over the skateboard, stopped, are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. And I never touched a skateboard again. I was like, done. I was like, nope, this is clearly not for me, which was funny because I wasn't into that scene either, per se. It was like, it was just more a byproduct of like learning about a lot of bands through those kind of things. Getting all the way back, like I remember finally getting the drum set and finally playing and then like starting the band, and I was like all hyped and ready to go to play because I knew you. We knew each other since elementary school. Not like we were good friends, but we knew each other since the time we were in basically kindergarten. I didn't really know Chris, but Chris, in my estimation, seemed like he knew, like it's going to sound very odd, but it's, at that perspective, it was like it seemed like he was comfortable in his own skin, like he knew who he was. I know different at this point because we were all trying to figure each other ourselves out. But I was like, oh man, he plays a guitar. He like wants to be in a band. He kind of clearly knows. He seemed like a cool kid to me,
Yeah.
and he was nice to me. And then
He was confident though. Like
he
it's
definitely was.
yeah, because he was also the kid who would like he was always hooking up with girls back then. And I was always afraid of girls. Like even now, like I've been divorced for 7 years and I'm still like afraid to just approach someone cold and talk to them. Like that hasn't never changed. But I remember he just had no fear back then and that was so cool to me. But yeah, he did have this kind of like confidence, which I think is funny because I think later on he's such a shy dude and like now he's got like two kids and he's married and he's works like this big he's like pretty high up in his company and it's hilarious, but he's just like doesn't want any of that shit. He's like, no, I don't need to be the front of the crowd, or I'm gonna hide in the
Right.
back here.
And then I remember him wearing like Face to Face Big Choice T-shirt. I had no idea who Face to Face was, and I remember him wearing that, and like he sort of kind of was dressing a little bit, I don't know, pop punk, I'll say. Yeah, I remember him being like really confident and going, "This is pretty cool because I got a confident guy that's going to sing and play guitar. I have a guy that I know from the time I was little who I always thought you were very nice. Yeah, I never had a problem with you. You never made fun of me, so that was a check. That was a check in my book. I was like, hey, Mike never made fun of me. He's nice. He's not gonna bother me. And you were always very funny. I think one of the nice things about my relationship with you, not that we were best friends or anything like that, but it was anytime we could talk, we could be sarcastic with one another or just try to make one another laugh.
Yeah.
And it was comfortable. So we were going into it. And as a complete side note, and I'm never gonna like I would never try to put anybody down, but it was funny because I was so amped for it to be the three of us. And then like I show up to the first, literally I think the first practice, and Chris is like, "Oh, here's Andy. He's playing the guitar." And I'm like, "Who the hell? What?" It's literally nothing against Andy. I had no idea who he was.
Me neither.
Like, whoa, what? Wait a minute, what? Like, and I got word that like Andy was going to be playing with us. I literally got deflated, and I don't really know why, because I was so pumped and amped to finally find a group or this vision that I had seen when I was 10 in my cousin's garage. Andy was a very nice person, and his parents were very nice. And I remember practicing at his place, but Andy and I never ever hung out, the two of us by ourselves. Like I could probably go hang out with Chris at that time by ourselves. Like I could go to Chris' house and be fine with Chris, and I could go to your mom's condo, which was like literally right behind where my development was, right behind the rock. And I could go hang out with you and be perfectly feel comfortable. And it was funny because throughout the entire time, I never felt that with Andy. I never like, and it's not to disparage or discredit or say Andy's a bad person, because he never ever was. He was nothing but nice. But it was this weird thing, and I don't know if I just brought that with me because I had this vision of what we were going to be, and then kind of Andy came in, and like I always liked having another guitar player because I love that just massive sound. I was looking for that big massive sound when I play or I record. I don't know if you felt that way
Oh,
or.
totally. I mean, as soon as you said that, because it's a couple things there. Like one, which was crazy to me, that when we got together for our first practice, it was in your parents downstairs, which it wasn't really a basement though. It was just like it was a bi-level house. You had the same setup as my house, but it was just like a big open, finished downstairs basement, whatever. I just remember you saying you had just got your drum set and you were playing so fast. I was like, wait, how are you able to play drums right now? Because you didn't have a drum set, so how are you able to play drums? I was so confused, and I was like, this is awesome.
I got my drum set like a week before that because I remember getting it. We played with Headley. My parents finished the basement, like they got carpet put in the middle of the week, and then we played on Friday or Saturday.
Wait a minute, that downstairs was just completed a week before we had our first practice?
my dad had done all the ceiling work and all the trim work and everything.
With the
It was
carpet.
yeah, the carpet had just been put down like
Get
a
the
year.
fuck out of
Yeah,
here. Cause I mean that's where our main practice space was downstairs in your or it's sometimes at Andy's, but like always your house, I thought.
right. Yeah, for the most part. And sometimes at Chris's, I used to when I started driving, we would play. I want to say upstairs at Chris's,
Yeah.
because like his house was like on like a back on, and it
That's right,
was
dude.
sort of like half built into a hill.
Yeah, that's where his parents still live there.
Oh, really? Yeah, my
Yeah.
parents are from White Rock. Yeah, my parents still in the same house. Yeah.
Fucking, but like, yeah, then Andy rolled in and Chris goes, I found this other guitar player. And I like just never, I mean, it was definitely, I mean, I told the story so many times in this podcast of like how, like, I was the one who kicked him out of the band when we were all at Taco Bell in Wayne, where we all went to Sound Exchange, went there, and then I was like, hey, man, let's go outside. And I was like, yeah, you're out of the band.
Was he out before or after me?
Oh, you were there to the end. I mean,
Yeah,
you,
that's right. Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was up prior to that because what happened was, so we show up at the first practice, and Andy did show up. And I had the same thing. Like he's a nice guy. It's just like I never. Chris had this connection with him, and Andy had this connection with Bob and Heiner and all that. And I think it's funny that you're saying that you felt this kind of like oh bummer thing because I almost had this because Andy would try to like fuck with me, and I never liked it because I was like, all right, there, asshole. You're 2 grades below us, and I don't think you're as cool as all the other friends around us seem to be. So I kind of had this like standoffishness against him because he would just like try to tell me stuff. Again, this is talking as 16-year-old me.
Michael.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is young way skinnier Michael. Um, but but yeah, man, like I never found that connection with him back then. So like when I did kick him out, like it was easy for me to do it, which is so awful to like say that out loud now, but I mean it was just honest.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it to be the three of us, and then I think we did the first practice without him, and then like Chris had said he was coming, and I remember being in English class for some reason, and just like when Chris told me, and I was like, oh, what? I was like, what do you mean? Like, I was like, oh, I thought it was just going to be the three of us because then we played. Because I remember Chris had one of the reasons, outside of what I had mentioned before, one of the reasons that I was able to like at least carry a beat per se at that time was because Chris had given me a mixtape, and he's like, learn these songs when you get your drum set. And he had written the stuff in there, and Chris has terrible handwriting. And I remember it's like really small on the like the little cassette sleeve. And I remember No Effects on Linoleum being on there and going like, how does that guy play with his bass pedal foot that fast? Because my cousins had double bass pedals. I'm still anti double bass pedal. I would never ever play a double bass outside of metal. I think it sounds terrible on anything else. But anyway, that's beside the point. Like,
It's totally cheating. It's completely cheating, which is I mean,
it's not cheating. Like, I think you could certain types of music.
it's totally cheating. It's cheating for punk rock to do. I mean, it would, I like, Steve definitely did that with Day at the Fair, which was hilarious because he added this metal sound to that. And Chris will probably say, Chris will have nothing but bad things to say about Steve. I mean, I have no problem with Steve, and I loved his drumming, but I was like, double bass, punk rock, nope.
Yeah, it's funny because I don't have a problem with Steve at all. I think Steve and we probably always had this unwritten sort of
Bromance.
no, not bromance, like competition. And I think you always feel that way because, like I said before, like Steve is a very good drummer, and he was very technically proficient from what I remember. And I remember I'm coming from just winging it, like just winging a prayer, just feeling the music. And I remember listening to Steve play, and I was like, man, he is so technically good. I remember randomly being at a party and talking to him, and we were talking about something. I think like Offspring, like Self Esteem was huge at the time, like 94, 95. And I love that album. And that was the second album that I found that was like punk rock that I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Just a melodic thing to it. And I remember he could play like Self Esteem. And I think I saw him play and I was like, wow, that's really good. And I didn't have a drum set at the time. But I remember he played the double bass. And I remember I recorded tracks on Day at the Fair on their album. I recorded piano tracks on that. I went to the studio and I remember listening back and just thinking in my head, my God, what the hell is Chris thinking? Like, why is he playing double bass pedal? And the pattern of the double bass pedal on like pop punk, I was like, what the it just doesn't sound right to me. I really like Chris's album, and the single off the album, the Eastern Home Western Hearts. Yeah. I still play that to today. It's on my constant playlist. I love the sound of it. I love the big guitars and whatever, but it drives me nuts when I hear Steve play the double bass. And again, it's not like it sounds wrong. This is nothing against Steve. Like, again, Steve was always very nice to me, but I always felt like we had that unwritten, like, competitive nature to us, because I always felt like Mark was always like the drummer in our band that was always a good drum, or our grade that was always a good drummer, and Steve was the grade lower, and I was always a kid that never had a drum set and was trying to play.
Well, that's the thing though. But that's like what I was so fascinated by, and like when we played, you're right. That first practice was, I think, just you, me, and Chris, and then Andy came to the second practice. But you were playing. The big thing about punk back then was that kick,
Yeah,
do that.
Fat Records,
the Fat Records, the Eric Mel or the smelly kick
Yeah.
drum, and
Mhm.
you were able to do that. And like, if I went back to that day, you probably weren't 100% spot on. But it's as much as my bass playing back then. I mean, not saying I'm great at all. I'm even really good now. But like, I mean, Chris was pretty much the one who kicked ass at his instrument. But I was just like, holy shit, this guy is just starting to play, and he's able to do that bass drum kick thing. I was like, holy shit, like we got a drummer. Like we got a band now.
Yeah, it was weird because it was just literally for like 3 or 4 years, like practicing on banging my hands and my feet on and following records and music and just doing the motions of what I thought it was going to feel like. And then once I got the kit and I started playing, and it just sort of just all of a sudden the actual mechanics were actually really close to what I was just banging on stuff. The Fat Records be like that. That's something that's like a feel that you have to figure out with your specific bass drum pedal. And to this day, I will never buy anything except like the cheap $40 kick pedal I can find, because that's what I know how to play. So you get like those really like $200 weighted pedals, and I'm like, I can't play with those things because the feel isn't right to me. To this day, I like just refurbish pedals and play with those because I'm so used to being able to play with that feel and that style and that like cheapness of pedal to do that, that Fat Records beat, because I remember that was on there. And then the other one that I was trying to figure out for so long, and I look back at it on it now, and I'm like, it is so easy to play, was Stranger Than Fiction by Bad Religion. I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, what does he do? Like, it's like hi-hat, snare, and then kick, and like, and back and forth. I think it took me longer to figure that out, which is actually much more simplistic than like Linoleum.
Oh yeah, because I mean he's playing like the hi hat and the snare the same as like a feeble shit. Dun, 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 dun,
Right,
dun.
right. And now playing it is like, it's straightforward, it's simple, but like that was on there. Dead Milkman, Punk Rock Girl.
Yeah.
For some reason, I remember that song being on there and being like, why does this guy sound like the nerdiest like vocalist I've ever heard? But the song was catchy.
Super quick though. I'm guessing you're not on Facebook, right?
I don't do social media, no.
Okay, so there's a Facebook group, New Jersey pop punk group. It's all focused back this whole time period, and Jay Vix, who was in Red Rover. Remember Red
Okay.
Rover?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Jay, he started the group, and when COVID hit and everyone was quarantining, or quarantined, he started doing these quarantunes, and the fourth one he did had the guy from the Dead Milkmen playing acoustic guitar. And he played Punk Rock Girl live from his house.
It's funny because like every once in a while, like on my YouTube feed, that song and that video will come up. It is just, it's like a surreal video. Like, and the song is like, it's like, what is this?
So, okay, this is what I remember. I remember you always having your Walkman or CD Man, whatever it was, with your headphones in, sitting at the lunch table, playing that tape and like playing the table with your hands. Is this
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
That
like
was that
over.
tape too, because you had because it was Heiner's skate tape.
I think, yeah. Well, yeah. Figures.
Yeah, it was what we used to skate to.
Like Chris would do anything on his own.
Yeah.
You can tell Chris. I'll tell him when I see him.
Do
He
you ever see
knows.
Chris? Are you in
I
Rockaway?
No. The last time I live in Chester, New Jersey. Why? Where's Chris at?
He's in Sparta, dude.
Really? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So he literally lives like 10 minutes from my parents.
Yeah. Oh my God, you guys should definitely hang out when there's like no pandemic.
Yeah, I haven't seen you and Chris since that time, and I think we just sort of like generally said our hellos, and that was kind of it.
Well, we borrowed your kit. Patino or Sean. I think it was Sean. He came up for that. He didn't have a kit, so we borrowed or a couple of some of your hardware for that show.
Oh yeah, now I remember. Yeah, I remember coming down to Maxwell's. Yeah, because I remember parking out front.
It was snowing or something like that.
Oh, yeah, but it was wintertime. Yeah, but yeah, now I remember. And then I remember like parking in the parking garage, and then yeah, getting the stuff back later on. But yeah, being nice, because I was never a fan of Sean's.
Really?
It's funny. I say that jokingly a little bit because well, listen, the guy took my position in the band. Like,
No, he did not. No, he did not.
Okay. All right,
You.
all right. So you want to go down this road, don't you?
So we
It's
could
funny because
we
you
could
and I
jump
are
ahead.
definitely gonna have different. We're gonna have different. Just well, let me say this about Sean. Like when we did the Modesty Panel thing, we went down, we played his record store, and we went to Busch Gardens with him and his girlfriend. We had a great time, and he was really, really super nice. And Sean was always nice to me, but it was funny because I always felt that way. But I always felt there was like a competition thing there as well too. But I don't know. Maybe drummers just have that. I don't know.
I kind of want to jump to the end for a second, and then we'll figure this. So this is what I remember.
Okay, you tell me how you remember this, and I'll tell you how it's wrong.
Okay, I could be wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm right. So what I remember is I kicked Andy out, and then we kept playing. You were dating Lois, and we played that show in Pennsylvania where the power kicked out after like 2 seconds of CK1. And then we left there and we played at that club with the band who was called the Hippos, but they were an 80s like rock band.
Yeah, it was actually, side note, they were actually called the Hip Pose. That was one of the first times where like the whole touring thing and how much it could really suck hit me.
Uh-huh.
Was being in the blue van. We're all piled into it. Like I think the Lears were there. Like there was a bunch of our crew there and playing that show. The power went out, and Chris is like, "Oh, I got this other show with the Hippos," and I vaguely remember the Hippos being
Ska band.
the way you guys had sort of portrayed it to me was like, oh, they're pretty popular ska band. Oh, that's cool. We're actually going to go to a punk show. And we show up and nobody's at this bar. This band is playing and they're like, oh, we're called the Hip Pose because I asked the guy and they were like in their 30s or something like that. And I was like, and then we're playing just to our friends out in Pennsylvania. Like, I was like, we could have done this in my basement. But yeah, they were called the Hip Pose, not the Hippos. And to this day, I wonder if Chris actually knew that.
That was the thing, man. Because there was these two girls at the skate park at that kid's house, and Colby. And I talked about this at the Steve with Goats interview too, because we talked about that show. Because Shower with Goats got us on that. And we were all going to stay there in the basement, and we all like jetted from there and went to this club. Those girls, I think they're friends with Steve Neurotic, Steve the Goats, and he's like, yeah, we got this show, we're going to play this band Hippos. I thought the same thing as you, because I was like, dude, this is great. That's this big ska band. We're going to play in front of a packed room. This is going to be amazing. And then we walk in, and this band's on stage. We're like, who the fuck is that? They're like, oh, that's the Hip Pose or whatever it was. I was like, oh, god damn it. And then we just played in front of our friends and Shower with Goats and vice versa. And then we left at like 1 a.m. or something, and you got in, and you're like, I'm driving home. And that was, I think, yeah, like you were about to say, like that was the beginning of you thinking, like, I don't really want to do this.
We didn't. No, I didn't drive home. We went to a hotel.
No, we didn't.
Or was it the night before we stayed?
No, the hotel one. That was when we first met Bigwig, because we played that outdoor festival.
Oh yeah, that's
and we
right.
we played Club Benet the night before, and the guy was unplugging us while we were playing.
Yeah, because he's like, oh, you got one more song. And like, because it was one of those stupid showcase things, right?
Uh-huh.
Oh, you got one more song, and we'll play whatever our second to last song is into Why Can't I Be? We always end the set with Why Can't I Be? And we're like, we'll just go right into it. So it sounds like one song. And it was clearly not. And they cut the power off on us, shut off the guitars. It was just me playing.
He walked up and started unplugging our amps one by one. That kid was in the front, and he wanted to become our booking agent, and he like just sucked at it after that. Remember that?
Yeah, I
know I'm jumping all over the place with stories, and we're gonna
right. So that trip was when we were in the blue van. That was the first time we took like a weekend, go somewhere and stay over, because I remember Heiner and I going into the going into the hotel or motel or whatever it was, the guy asked 7 times, "Are you sure it's just the two of you? Like, it's just the two of us?" We're like, what, 17?
Yeah, you're 17.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're gonna be going home, but it's late and we don't want to, get into a crash. So, are you sure it's not? And and you guys and we pull the van and we back it up to the room. Rob and I get out, we open the door, and like everybody pulls out of the van and just goes right into the room.
Yep.
That guy is so gonna knock on our door and be there's like 10 of us all over the place. Never happened, luckily, and we went home. I forgot that was two separate things.
And remember when we played up in fucking Nyack and I ripped the side view mirror off that car with my car
Yeah.
and took off? Yeah. So that was like, that was us like figuring that whole thing, like playing shows, starting to play really good shows or like
Right.
local scene shows. And then we got Bruce. And I think we got Bruce after Andy was out because because we were a three-piece at that show in wherever, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, because we had recorded. Actually, you know what's really funny is I just got from Badami the last 3 songs we recorded at Portrait.
What 3 were they?
So CK1, which is out in a comp, so that was actually released. But then Evil Twin and Mrs. Pop.
Mrs. Pop. Was that Broken Pretzel Girl?
No, Broken Pretzel Girl was another song. Oh my God, I forgot about that one. That was like the din 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 din. Remember that one? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I think that was Broken Pretzel Girl.
That's how I came to find your podcast. Okay, so the Happy Little Trees compilation came up on my YouTube feed somehow. I guess because I like randomly will like listen to punk rock music in YouTube. It came up, and I was like, I remember that comp. I think I'm on that comp. I look at the back of the comp, and it's like Lanemeyer, CK1, and I'm like, Lanemeyer didn't do CK1. We recorded that. That was like the last songs we recorded with Badami. And those jerks put it out, and I had no idea until like last week that's what was the case. I was like, those jerks. I put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, they had moved on.
Well, no, what happened was the reason we did that was because we had changed our name. We started as Congress to Cow. We kept Congress to Cow when we got Sean and Alan, and then Sean and Alan were like, we don't want to be called this anymore. We got to get a new name. After a couple months of doing that, and Alan said, let's do this Lanemeyer thing, and then right at that time, whoever put the Happy Little Trees comp out approached us and said, we want to put this comp out. And we're like, all right, well, we're changing our name and we want to keep playing this song. So just say Lanemeyer.
Right. So you stiff me of all my $10 worth of
Your
royalties. I will still always and be forever angry about that.
What happened was, in my memory, this is after that show in Pennsylvania. You were like, I want to go to college, and you and Lois were serious, and you were like, because that became a wedge, because you would be like, I just want to hang out with her. We're like, you should fucking want to play shows, and that was us just being teenagers, being stupid. And we go to Del Vecchio's house. He has a party, and then we stayed up in that
Hackettstown, right?
In Hackettstown,
at his parents' house. Yeah,
at his parents' house. So we're all drunk. We're upstairs in like the yellow bedroom or something where we're all crashing. And we just had this giant talk about you wanting to be in the band. It was like all of us were kind of against you. You started stating your case. And I remembered I was like, okay, I can see his point. And then Chris got mad at me. He's like, fuck you, don't take his side or some shit. And then the next day, it was kind of like decided. Then you played your last show with us in Hackettstown at some point, where I think like Brian Fallon ended up booking that show, which was hilarious years later. And then that was it, because we played with one cool guy. That's what I remember. So then, but my thing was that you wanted to quit because you didn't want to tour. But how do you remember it?
Just a little side note about Fallon. It was really funny because I had been completely out for a while, and I heard the Gaslight Anthem, and it kind of brought me back in a little bit. And this was, going back 9 years at this point. I didn't realize that he was ever in Lanemeyer with you. I was like, oh, that's crazy. I didn't know Doyle ever knew or whatever that story was until I actually heard the podcast with you and Chris. I was like, wow, that's kind of weird. But anyway, get back. I pretty much remember it the same exact way. I think what was sort of going on was I never didn't want to play a show, and I would never skip out on a show to go hang out with a girl. that I was dating, but I remember because we had been playing local shows and you guys we wanted to branch out. We wanted to go play in Pennsylvania, play for the weekend, play in New York, wherever we could start putting or stringing together like a show on a Friday and Saturday night or Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we were all graduating. And I remember having that discussion up at the Vecchio's house, and we were talking about it. What happened was we were in college at that point. So at some point prior to that evening up in Hackettstown, we had a discussion after we graduated high school that we basically all decided, listen, we're all going to go to CCM. We're just going to go to CCM. Why don't we just go there? We can just get 2 years of an associate's degree. We can set it up so our classes, like we don't have Thursday, Friday, we don't have Thursday, Friday classes. And then we could like do the weekend stuff. And you guys were on board with that. Like, and we went sort of through the summer, and all three of us went to County College that fall 97. And you literally, I think, stopped going like the first week. Like,
I think it was the second week.
Like the first or second week of the fall semester. Chris made it through the entire semester and literally had like a 0.3 GPA. I was taking mechanical engineering courses and I got straight A's in like 5 classes or 6 classes. After the fall semester was over before Christmas, because I think we were at Del Vecchio, it was like in January, it was wintertime. I know that.
It was November because we entered 98 and became Lanemeyer. So this is like November, December.
Right. I remember having the discussion and you guys are kind of like, well, we want to go on tour. And I kind of was like, well, we agreed that we were going to go to, county and do like the weekend thing, because at the very worst, like what happens? You end up with an associate's degree and then you could like do something with it or whatever. That like just completely fell apart because of that. And I remember having the discussion with you guys that evening and basically saying it was never about the girl. Like, it's not about that. I was like, just because I hang out with her all the time, I was like, I never miss practice. I never would not want to play shows on the weekend. That's not what it's about. And I realized, looking back, I didn't hang out with you guys as a group as much, which sort of fractures it a little bit because I had her and that was where my time was most spent outside of my time with you guys when we were actually playing and practicing, which I was okay with because that's what I love to do. And I got so angry about that because you were just like, well, you have a girlfriend and that's all you do. And we want to go on tour. And I was kind of like, dude, I just got straight A's. I can't walk away from that at this point. This isn't what we agreed on.
Did you know though, like 2 things. One, I remember you were like, guys, it's not about her. And we were like, dude,
yes, it is.
Of course it's about her. You're right, fuck you, fuck her. And you're like, exactly. No, it's not. We're like, no, we know. Yeah, you're completely right.
Fast forward just a slight bit. I think we played what was my last show, and I don't have a recollection of whether you told me it was my last show, whether I knew it was my. Do you remember that?
That's what I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't. I would err on the side that I did not know.
I think you did because you did that really long drum solo.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it just being like, and that's why it's not totally clear because I don't remember that just being me doing that to be obnoxious, because it clearly was. But like, and I was all over the place. But like, I don't remember if it was my final hurrah and just say, kind of like an F you, like, no, I don't care. You guys sit there and listen to me.
I thought you did it because you knew it was the last time you were going to be playing live, so you wanted to go out with a bang, not like a fuck you. It was just kind of like, all right, I just need to have something here to end this.
Here's what I vividly remember. And I don't know if it was before that and we had like sort of calmed down and then we played the last show, or it was like the day after or whatever. But I very, very, like, I can picture it in my head to this day. Being at Chris's house upstairs, walking down the hallway, you and Chris are in Chris's room. I walk down that little hallway. Chris has the door in the back. I go in there. We talk about something and you started like getting angry and yelling at me and basically like, no, you're out. Like, it's done. Wow. It's over. You're not in the band. Literally, my heart just broke. You were so angry with me. And I remember we never were angry at one another, ever.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, this guy above our friendship just wants to go on tour because he wants this so bad. And I would never, ever to this day take that away from you. And you guys did what you did. what a weird hypocritical thing to do. And Chris sort of like just sunk away, because Chris wasn't good at dealing with confrontation. And he just sort of like, it was like in the movies where like the person's like floating, but they just move out of the picture. Like, okay, I'll be in the other room. I'm not going to comment on this. And I remember
Wow.
walking after you back down the hall and going, what do you mean? And you just like, you couldn't even get words out because you were so angry at me. And I don't know if you were just angry at me because I had forced you to kick me out of the band, or like my vision wasn't your vision, even though like it was similar. I wasn't ready to just drop everything at that point because of the girl and because of my education. And I felt angry like a little bit because you guys had gone back on your word. And just because I did well, it's now my fault. All of the emotions of everything going back to when I was in my cousin's garage and seeing that, and then going through the progression that we went through, and then playing shows. And then it was finally, and again, no disrespect to Andy whatsoever, but it was sort of back to the vision that I had always seen with the three of us. And we started doing these little like weekend things. And I was like, this is really cool. It's getting going. And then just being like, man, why don't you see it? I remember just leaving. I got in my car and I left. And I probably went to Lois's house because it wasn't that far from Chris's. But like, I just remember just being like, just deflated, just completely deflated. I would have said that was probably after the show, and maybe I didn't think it was my last show, or maybe I had an inkling or a suggestion, but that was really like, and I don't know if I was like that girlfriend or that boyfriend that was sort of hanging on, and I just showed up, and you're like, what are you doing here? You're out of the band.
No, no, no. I do not. I remember a lot of stuff. I do not remember any inkling of that moment in Chris's house. Like I don't even remember, like I figure like a small part of me would say, "Oh yeah, I remember being in Chris's room," but like I don't remember that whole thing at all, and especially don't remember yelling, which is so crazy.
You didn't want to even have a discussion. You just walked away from me. And I think I tried to, but I was too awkward and shell shocked to know kind of what happened. And I was like, man, I just got kicked out of the band. And then just thinking for a while, like, I want nothing to do with this ever again.
Wow.
I'll go home and I'll play the piano every once in a while, and that'll be it. I packed my drums away. I didn't touch my drums for a couple of years. Literally after that day, I packed them up, and that was it.
Jesus Christ, dude. That's so wild. Yeah, okay. This is what I'll say. This is what I don't remember this, and that's. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and apologize for something I did back then, but I feel like it's so crazy. I feel bad that that happened. What I think was the driver is this is like around the same time that I was having like a really strayed relationship with my dad, and he he met my stepmom when I was like 11 or 12, and I had this thing against girlfriends or wives, or just because I always felt that they would just take someone away. So, which is basically happened with my dad. Like, I basically became estranged from my dad at that time because I was like, he was just choosing her over me. So I think that transferred over to me being like, if you're with someone and you're taking them away from me, you're a piece of shit. And it sounds like super like psychology breakdown, but I think that was definitely the main focus because I was like, you're right though. I was like, I want to go on tour so bad. All I want to do is this band. And if anyone has a girlfriend, which again wasn't the thing, and you were explaining it to us, you're like, no, we said we were going to do this, which again, I don't remember that conversation, but I'm going to agree with you on that. And yeah, I think that the driving force was I'm not listening to you. You're dating this girl. She's taking you away from the band, which takes you away from my dream. So that's where the explosion comes from or came
Right.
from.
Yeah. And looking back on it now, I clearly know that because the girlfriends that I've ever had have never been into the scene in any way, shape, or form. There's a few girls that the guys dated, part of the scene. They liked the music. They would go to shows. I never dated a girl like that ever in my entire life. And it was like this because I don't know, I don't know why. I guess it just never happened, or like it was just sort of selfishly, like, no, this music thing is mine.
You know what honestly pissed me off years later? I wouldn't say pissed me off, but I was kind of irked about
Hmm.
when you joined Modesty Panel, and I heard that you wanted to tour and all of that. I was like
Mad.
kind of butthurt about that because I was like, this fucking guy
You're welcome.
didn't want to tour. And now he wants to fucking tour. I was like, and it was never a point where I was like, I never want to talk to him. But I was like, that son of a bitch. That was kind of
Well,
like my reaction.
and it's funny too because the thing that sort of irked me too was like I remember going to Hot Topic in the mall. And it was funny. My wife and I were randomly at the Rockaway Way Mall 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever. I remember going there because they used to have a music bin. You guys talk about going to Flipside. I think I went to Flipside one time.
Yeah, I don't think that was like your spot.
I met Alan. I remember going to Alan's house because his dad or
Well,
had
he did our layout. He did the Congress of Cal layout.
Right, yeah, yeah. I remember doing that, and I remember like his dad had like like a puppet sized Yoda, and I was like, wow, this is cool as hell. Alan probably wouldn't know me from anybody. I remember him with Pop Kid. I remember getting a couple Pop Kid records through Chris, and I remember sort of like liking them, but not really liking them because it wasn't as melodic or catchy. Like to me, it's about choruses and catchy, and that's what drives me.
Well, they were really different from Fat Records. They were totally different from that sound.
Chris came back like one day and at lunch and he was like, "Oh, we went to Flipside with Angelucci and with Mike," and he was like, "Oh, we met this kid Alan and we played him our tape. Remember, we did the tape and we had the tape. Was it Derek did the artwork for it? It was like a guy smoking on the cover.
But we recorded it at the high school when you used like that
Yeah,
electric
it
kick
was like,
that
yeah, it was
electric kit.
yeah, it was literally on like the bright orange, purple, pink, yellow, and wood clear like Memorex tapes, and we had given them to our friends and whatever. And Chris had gone to Flipside and played it for Alan, and Alan like was like, "This is pretty good." And I remember like being, not knowing anything at 16, and Chris coming back and going, "Yeah, this guy Alan from Flipside really likes the tape, and he says we should get shows." And I remember just being so excited about that, and that's really like all I really know about Alan, to be honest with you. Like, and but I remember like, oh, the guy at the record store thinks our tape is awesome. Like
We're huge.
we're gonna be huge.
I think we all thought the same thing, man. I think like that's where Chris fell in love with Alan, basically.
That was my introduction to Alan, and like I know really nothing more than that. It was just like Alan was this dude at a record store that had punk rock stuff there, and I was just getting into. My introduction essentially to punk rock was basically Basket Case came on the record, and my brain fell out of my head. This is my rock and roll. I had that album on repeat over and over and over and over again. And then, Offspring was like right thereafter. And I listened to that a lot as well too. Then like through you guys, getting back to what we're kind of talking about, like it's sort of like the flip side thing. And then like going to back and getting the tape from Chris and like having No Effects and Bad Religion and a whole bunch of random stuff. I think there was Dead Kennedys were on there. So like I started like Ramones, I started going, I always felt like I was like late to the game because then like everybody was like the sellout thing, and I'm like, I don't even know what the hell that means. like what the hell does that mean? Like I don't know. Like I literally was so green, to that whole thing, and then going back and then discovering all of this other stuff because I remember getting the tape from Chris and like literally saying to you or Bob or Rob, like, what do you guys go to the record store and just find the weirdest band names you could find and just hope it's any good? Because I was so ignorant to it because I still was like listening to that other stuff.
Well, that's what they would do. I mean, they would basically do that, and then Alan was the one who kind of funneled that in. He's like, okay, well, I like the idea of being adventurous, but let me put you in kind of a section here and do it here.
I remember being at your mom's condo upstairs in your room, and Chris broke out Static Prevails, and that was like the second time where I was like,
Yeah.
this isn't the melodic rock and roll, but there's something about this. Again, to this day, Call It in the Air is on my like on a loop on my playlist. You sort of could understand the lyrics, but you sort of couldn't. And then when Clarity came out, that was the second time I was like, holy, I was like, wow. I remember for some reason before I was out of the band or I was out of the band and somehow like I connected with Rob Heiner. We sat in his car and listened to this song down at White Rock in the parking lot behind my parents' house at the elementary school. I think we listened to the whole thing. We just like it was at nighttime and we just like
because we would skate there. We went there in the summertime and we'd skate, and Rob would pull his car up to the the sidewalk or the school, and he'd open up his back and he'd just blast music and we'd skate to it.
No matter like what kind of punk rock per se you were in, like it just seemed like everybody was cool with it. It was like the university version of like like what we were trying to do at Young and like drifting into it. But it's funny that you say that about like the modesty panel thing, because going from that and putting my drums away from like totally getting kicked out, being at Hot Topic, Sean was like a manager there.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to find a job because I think I was working at JCPenney in the mall at the time. And I was like, I don't want to do this. This would be cool. I get to listen to awesome music all day. Like, I don't care about the merchandise or the posters or whatever. That's not me. And I remember filling out a thing and giving it to Sean. And I remember Sean looked at me. There is no way, kid, you are ever work here. You don't have the look, you don't have the vibe, you are not a personable person. That will always be ingrained in my head. And when I found out that he was the guy, I was like, screw you guys. I was like, that's a total cop out. I was like, you went with an older guy who has connections, who knows people and wants to go on tour. And I was like, you want to talk about selling out? Like, I couldn't get a job at Hot Topic, but yet you go right to the source, man. Screw Sean. I was like, that's messed up.
So it's funny that you said he had connections. Sean had no connections. He came out. We knew him because all of Granick and Josh and all them work there. So we met Sean through that way. Sean just said, "Hey man, I heard you're looking for a drummer. I'm surprised you didn't ask me." And then that Chris was like, "Oh, he plays drums," and he went in and like he was like, "Hey, let's try you out." We had no idea that he was going to start booking shows. Like he was basically become the manager and all that. Like we just want a drummer. Like we had no idea. Like, he had zero connections. He just hustled his ass off.
That's your teenage mind looking at it and going like, dude, this guy, like, because I remember Josh working there. And again, Josh was always nice to me. I know, I mean, I saw Josh once or twice, like after that because of Jay. And I remember Josh working there and Josh sort of like, remember Josh looking at me like same way. I've always felt sort of like just out of step from everybody else. It's like in the movies where you and Chris would go up to somebody and they'd be like, oh, Chris, Mike. And then like I'd walk up to him last and be like, hey, my name's, and before I could even get my name out, they're already gone following you guys, like doing something else. And I'm just sitting there like with my hand out to nobody. It's just like, hey, I'll go get the drums, okay?
Well, I mean, at the same time, you're also a drummer. I mean, no one cares about the drummer.
I was never the center of attention, like within the group or any group I've ever been in. It was just like, even like with Jay was very similar to Chris in the sense that the kids that he hung out with and who I got to know, even about Jay, what's Jay doing? Where's Jay going? What is he doing? So like it was always sort of the center. Going back to high school, I always felt Chris was like,
yeah,
Chris doing, true. And then like everybody sort of went in that direction. But yeah, I always felt with the scene of like outcasts, I was an outcast within the
You're like, son of a bitch.
I was like, hey, I'm Jay. Oh, okay. But I remember meeting Josh like that, and he was nice to me. Gabe, they would never even be able to know or even remember who I was. But like, I remember meeting Gabe like that, and a bunch of other people like Boxcar and Bigwig. I remember Bigwig being like amazing with energy. That's the kind of vibe, energy wise, like as drumming, like I want to give off. And I remember meeting those guys and sort of like the same thing. Like you guys would talk to them and meet them, and I would just they were just like, yeah, who's this guy?
Well, it's funny, dude. Like a couple things. I had this scrapbook, and it's just like I have a Lanemeyer sticker on. I found it a couple months ago when my mom just moved to Savannah, so she had these boxes of mine, and I have this scrapbook that I made from high school up until like our second tour as Lanemeyer, third tour. Actually, I'm sorry, the tour through with Humble, that was the fourth tour. But there's Congress of Cow pictures in there. And there's our prom pictures in there.
Yeah, I have those too.
And I remember that, like you playing piano at the prom, and I totally remember that. This is so sidetracked, and then I'm going to jump back to the Monty panel thing. I could swear that, again, this totally breaks from what we're talking about, but you said something, when you said Jimmy Eat World, it reminds me of Knapsack. I could swear. And I think I interviewed Blake from a Knapsack, and who's the singer, and I interviewed him, and then I interviewed Sergi, who was in Sam I Am and Knapsack, and I think I asked him, I was like, a buddy of mine saw you guys play at Warped Tour when you guys were at Action Park. Remember when you went with all the guys to see Action Park to go to see Warped Tour?
Yeah, face to face, 96.
I could swear that you said you saw Knapsack and you were like, they were so boring. and I could, I don't know why I remember it like this. You guys got back from Warped Tour, and we all went to White Rock to skate,
Yep.
and you were just like, I can't believe I just saw Face to Face. This is the greatest fucking day of my life. But I could swear that you said you saw Knapsack there, and they were really boring.
Did they play?
I thought they did, but then, I mean, I didn't tell the story like that to them. I was like, hey, my buddy said he saw you at Warped Tour, and they were like, no, we never played there. I'm like, I don't know why I remember this story like that, but you were the person that said you had seen them, and you were like, they were so boring.
I remember getting from Rob or Chris the Mineral CD, and I remember getting from Rob or Chris. It was probably Rob because I think I still kind of knew Rob after I was out of the band and when I was like in college here or there. But I remember getting a Mineral CD, and I remember getting a Knapsack CD. But it was like the second year of county, so you guys were gone, so I wasn't talking to either one of you. So I think it was still through like Rob. So I don't think I heard of Knapsack after that. What I remember, four things I remember about that show up in Action Park. Number one, being in the front for Face to Face, because once Chris showed me Face to Face and Disconnected, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And they're still one of my favorite bands. Everything they've done, seeing Face to Face was like huge because I know Chris got huge into Face to Face, and that was one of the first bands where like when we started playing in Congress of Cow, he was really into Big Choice. I remember getting the Face to Face self-titled, and we got it, and we played it in Chris's car, and Chris was like, "This sucks," and I was sitting there going like, yeah, I don't think it's that good. And in my head, I was like, why did you say this? This is amazing. I was like, it sounds so big and huge, and the guitars are like gigantic, and it's recorded with money. Like it actually sounds really amazing. And Chris was like the cool kid in our group. So I was like, yeah, I don't think it's very good. And he's like, yeah, I don't think I want it. And I actually think he gave me the CD, and I took it home and played it like on a loop for like months on end.
I think I remember that. I think I
I
remember you
remember
telling me
that.
that. Yeah.
But in the Warped Tour, Blink-182 played the Warped Tour.
Yes.
They literally played on the side stage on the back of a trailer, and there was like 300 kids there. They were like Cheshire Cat had like come out, and Rob had that like on a loop in his car, and we loved that album. Like
Yes.
big album for all of us. And seeing them play in front of like, and then what they turned into, seeing them play and like 300 people there, like bothered to watch them. Face to Face was huge. They were on the main stage, and there was like 1,500 people watching them, and I was in the front, and that was amazing. And I remember after watching Blink, the other thing as I remember, there was a whole bunch of Archers of Loaf stickers all over everything. And I was like, to this day, I'm pretty sure they're a band, but like to this day, I've never looked it up.
They're a
I don't remember anything about Knapsack at the time because I don't think I found out about Knapsack until later. I think when Heiner gave it to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the other thing I remember is NoFX played the main stage after Face to Face. So they would like do the main stage and then the side stage. And I think Rocket from the Crypt played like after Blink, and then NoFX came on, and I was like, man, I really like that Linoleum song, and I like Bob because that was on the tape I think that Chris gave me, but I didn't really know anything about him. Like I think the Rib CD was out, and Punk and Drublick.
I think Heavy Petting Zoo was just about to come out, or was out.
Maybe, yeah. And I never listened to that album, but like the two previous ones I hadn't remembered from you guys or Rob giving them to me, or like me dubbing them on a tape or something from a CD, and listening to it. And I was like, man, I really like NoFX, not as much as Face to Face, but I really like them. And I remember we were walking through the back of the crowd, and there's like mosh pit coming on, and Chris going, these guys are total sellouts. And I was like, I want to go watch them, guys. And and they were like, and we totally just like left. We like NoFX is playing, in front of like 1,500 people, and we just leave because they're sellouts. And again, I had no idea. I was like, what the hell is that? I was like, what does that mean? And I remember going out into the parking lot. Andy was there, and I don't know if you were there.
I wasn't. I was so jealous that you guys went.
Right, you didn't go. And I would think it was me and Rob and Andy and Chris. And we met Mark and Tom in the parking lot.
That's
like
right.
They literally like they were parked where we were parked. They had their van and their trailer, U-Haul trailer, ish. and they're literally parked where everybody else going to the Warped Tour is parked. Like that would ever happen today. Like, which was hilarious because what was that the first year of the Warped Tour or
Yeah, it was
second?
right in the beginning, but it was the only time. I think it was the only time it was ever at Action Park.
Action Park, right? Because it wasn't Mountain Creek, which it is today. It was Action Park. We were walking by and we're just like, dude, that's Mark and Tom from Blink 182. And I was like, and we were like, Andy, go talk to him. Like we always made Andy do it.
Yeah.
And like, I remember going over to him, and they literally could care less what we had to say. Like that was my impression. I was like,
I thought you guys actually talked to them and got photos with them, and they were
no,
cool.
that wasn't my recollection. Like my recollection, just sort of again not talking and just sort of being the guy on the outside, was we're sitting there. It's like a dirt parking lot. Like they're getting changed, because they had just played. It was awesome set. We love the album. There's only like 300 people. It was like a Legion Hall show. It was amazing. We go out and we're talking to Mark and Tom. They're getting changed, and all they want to do is like go to the water park, and we're bothering them. And like Andy was like talking to him like, oh, if you ever come this way on tour, we're this nothing like little local band trying to get Blink 182. Like, and they weren't gigantic at the time, but like, to play like a local show with us. And they couldn't give us the time of day. I mean, that was my recollection of it. They might have gotten pictures with them. I don't remember, but like they literally were just like, listen, kids, we just want to go to the water park and have a good time. That was my first introduction to the persona on and off stage. Because on stage they were like the most goofy, like ridiculous guys, and it was so funny, and they just looked like total guys that you could just like walk to and hang out with and talk to. And then we got to the parking lot, and it was the complete opposite. And the other thing I remember about that day is being in the park with the guys, and we went on rides and stuff like that. And we were walking down the hill, and Face to Face is walking up the hill. And I loved Face to Face, and Trevor's there and Chaz there, and they're just like walking around. And I remember like saying, "Thing, Andy, go talk to him."
And he would.
Yeah, and he would. And that was the great thing about Andy. Like he would talk to anybody. He went up to him and he was like, yeah, we're a local band, like you ever around? And they were nice. Like they were like, yeah, well, we're on tour with the Warped Tour, so like we're not really coming to Jersey. We can't we'd love to play a show with you, but it's not in the cards.
Was that the last time when Matt Riddle was in the band?
I don't remember. I saw them at Irving Plaza a few years.
Yeah. It was you, me, Heiner, Tracy Zangro, and
you were there at that show. But
yeah.
Did we randomly hook up at that point? Like in terms of like,
wait, we drove together, I thought.
Did we?
Heiner drove.
Kind of like, because you were done with Lanemeyer at that point.
No.
What?
No, man. Yeah, we were still. No, Congress of Cow was like still together, I thought.
When we went to go see, because I can't remember because I would have said Newfound Glory and Alkaline Trio played the show I went to see.
Oh, okay. No, that was a different show. We saw them and played Irving Plaza right when the self-titled album came out. They sold out Irving Plaza, and they Suicide Machines opened for them at that.
Okay,
that was the
I didn't go to that show because I really like the Suicide Machines too. Yeah, no, I didn't see. I saw Face to Face again. I want to say it was like 2000, 2001.
Yeah, when they're
because like Newfound Glory hit with the first record, Hit or Miss was like all over the radio, and Alkaline Trio was playing, and Face to Face we saw there. And I haven't seen them since live, but that was a fun day. But I remember the weird kind of like disposition of like Face to Face, like not being goofy on stage, but like straightforward and like serious, but not in a bad way, like that they wanted to play really well. And I was like, wow, I love that. Like it's all about the music for them. They want to play really well. And I remember Blink just being goofy and funny, and they were all over the place musically. But we still love the sound and the music, and then meeting them in the park, and then meeting them like in real life, and like Face to Face being one way and Blink just totally being the other way. And I was just like, wow, that's sort of a crazy introduction to like meeting like some of your early heroes.
Yeah, because I think Chris told me too. I think NoFX was walking around and El Jefe was pushing his kid in a carriage or something, and they were like they didn't want to give anybody the time of day.
We went to go get food or something because I think Shelter was playing next to the food tent or something like that, and I knew nothing about them. Like I vaguely remember like Mike Ziobro and Chris talking about them or like having the album, and I'm like, I don't think this is my thing. But they were like playing, and then there was like a food tent or something, and there was a chain link fence up, and yeah, he was pushing his kid in a stroller, and a bunch of kids recognized him, and they were like, "Yeah, hey, El Jefe, El Jefe," and I went over by the kids, and he was like signing autographs, and I was like, "Wow, that's so weird." But he was like behind a chain link fence.
Oh, I thought he was ignoring everybody.
I I don't know if he
Remember
was
what Chris said.
like whatever. Yeah, but it was like, but it was after they played, and it or before they played or something like that, and I was just like, okay, it was that's funny. I forgot about that, but I remember that part of the day as
Well,
well.
it's definitely before they played since you guys left. But I remember all I remember is I'm home. Heiner pulls up with you in his car, and he's like, "Dude, get in my car. We're going to White Rock. We're going skating. We're going to tell you all about this awesome show." And you, I think, had never skated or were going to. So I remember you were skating with us or something, but it was at nighttime and you were just blasting it. And you guys were just telling me all these stories, and
How amazing it was.
I was like, why the fuck did I not go to this? I was so bummed out that I missed that.
That's probably my top three shows, and I almost never go to shows. I'm one of those jealous guys. Like I'm like, screw you, you made it. I'm not gonna go see you. I'll just listen to your CD. like like I never ever go to shows, but like I think that was one of my top three shows. The other one was randomly when I met Jay. We randomly went to a Legion Hall at Princeton University, and the Get Up Kids and At the Drive-In played. And this was right before At the Drive, literally like weeks before Drive-In blew up. And that show was amazing. I mean, there was like 100 people there.
So funny thing about that is that on that tour, either they were about to go to Connecticut or had just left Connecticut because Justin put on, he was going to Sacred Heart. He put on shows there. He ended up putting on a show for us and Hot Rod Circuit before they were Hot Rod Circuit, and Alkaline Trio before they like blew up with Goddamn It, and we played in front of like 20 people. And the next year, so he put on the Get Up Kids at the Drive-In show at Sacred Heart, and me and Chris drove out. We played the show as Lanemeyer in like Nyack, got in my car and hightailed it out there. It was like 2 hours or so to get to there, and we missed the show. And we ended up hanging out with James DeWeese afterwards at Justin's place. And yeah, and then like Chris and them, they went to a supermarket to get food, and they ended up buying Depends to see if they could piss in them with James DeWeese. Yeah.
That's funny, like because I met James outside of the Legion Hall. They had a tour bus,
Yep.
The Get Up Kids, which I was like, wow, because I'm just Jay and I were just fooling around, like playing. We weren't doing anything serious at the time. I was still the jerk offs at the time. Yeah, like I went out and Lois and I had broken up. Like we were together for like 2.5 years. We broke up, and then
Wait, how'd you break up? How'd you break up?
um, yeah, I guess it doesn't. I don't like to bring things to light, but she was done with me for a period of time. So I left county and I went to NGIT down in Newark. And I was commuting, so I went to NGIT and she went to Montclair State. And at some point in that transition over, she cheated on me, and I remember going over there, and that was the first time I got my second time, if we count yours, but the first time I got my heart broken was that was it. It was
Man.
that was the big one. We all go through it. Every guy and girl goes through it, the big one, and it gets you jaded for quite some time. Yeah, we broke up for 6 or 7 or 8 months. She cheated on me, went off with an older guy, money, whatever. I have no idea. And then, like, I spent 8 months pining after her, and then we eventually got back together for another 2 years. And when we split, finally, it was very amicable. We realized we were going in two different directions. We were two different people. So it was very nice at the end.
That's good.
But yeah, it was rough, for a little bit. But anyway, so like, what was I saying prior to that?
You you were saying the Mozzie panel.
Right. So I meet James. I go to the drive-in and Get Up Kids with random one night. Jay's like, okay, we're going down to Princeton. I'm like, for what? And we see this amazing show in a Legion Hall. I go talk to him because the last track on Something to Write Home About, I'll Catch You, was my anthem during that time that I wanted her back. Like I would play that song on repeat. And I was like, this is just an amazing song. Listen, I know you made a mistake. You know you made a mistake, or you will know you made a mistake, and I can't do anything about it, and it hurts like hell, and I know you're going to get hurt, and I know you're going to come back, but even through all that, I want you back, kind of deal.
Yeah.
What the song meant to me. I saw James, and he was headed towards the tour bus because they had one at the time, and I was like, hey James, I just want to tell you, I was like, listen, and I explained that to him, and he was like, oh, that's cool, thanks, and he got on the tour bus. And I was like, have you read the book On the Road by Kerouac?
I mean, I definitely know of it. I just never got into Kerouac.
It was funny because I don't know if Jay Blanda had me read it or whatever. I think he had me read not Catch 22
Catcher in the Rye?
no, Catcher in the Rye. And I remember Jay was like so into that book, and he would say, dude, you got to read it. And I remember he gave me a copy, and I read it, and it didn't click to me. And I was like, I'm not that kid. I was the total opposite. And then like I don't know if Jay gave it to me, but I picked up On the Road by Kerouac. Basically, the premise of the book is basically Kerouac is playing, and or he's writing about his experience with a character called Dean Moriarty. Dean is like Jay Blanda, is like Chris Barker. For me, those are the guys that are like the wild guys, the pop guys, the guys that like led everything and did all these crazy nights and was the person that could talk to anybody. The Jack Kerouac, who's the narrator, was like is the guy Sal Paradise, which is the guy that's like always following these guys for these adventures, but always sort of coming back to regular life per se, or that understanding. And like that book, like I read it, I probably read it like 25 times, and it's just like that's me. Like that's how I feel about myself with all of this time period. Was like I was always the guy like scrambling to follow everybody else because all I did was love the music. Like I fell in love with it. I just wanted to play music. All I wanted was to be in front of 200 people in a Legion Hall with people singing our choruses back to us. And I was like, I don't need to be in Madison Square Garden or do any stuff like that. Like I was like, if we could just sustain a career like a Face to Face or a NoFX or something like that, going all the way back to Congress of Cal, I was like, that would be the most amazing thing in the world to me, because you're not that like complete rock star idiot, but you got this loyal fan base for like years on end that will just sing your songs and play tight and be on the ball. And just like the music in my head was the end all be all. And I loved everything about playing the music. And then everything else just was like, oh.
It's funny you say that, man, because I always saw that with you in general. Like exactly what you just said was like, it's clear as day back then. There was never a point where I was like, it was just like, that's exactly, you could see that's how you saw it back then.
It was always like that. I mean, from the time like I wanted to be a great live musician and part of a great live band where we were just really good and it was all about the music. But the touring, like those little things, even with Modesty Panel and doing a small tour, and going around the country with them, like it was the same thing. It was the best time and it was the worst time at the same time. It was the weirdest thing because we get to get on stage and we get to play. And it was not like anybody has ever sung our songs or my songs, but like, it was so amazing to be in that moment. And then I could just care less about the rest of it. Like other than the friendships, like, I don't know, there's so many other things I want to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I never thought we never got a real crowd singing back to us in Congress of Cal, unless there was our friends. But we ended up getting that with Lanemeyer after doing that for a while, and then it started to, because we put our EP out over that summer. That's when it started to kind of work. But like we never 100% got like. But as I say, like between Congress of Cal, you didn't really get that. And it doesn't sound like with Modesty Panel you got that either, where you had this giant
No,
crowd singing back to
it
you.
was funny in listening to the things that you had sort of talked about a little bit with Jay Jerkoff, and being in the band in the Jerkoffs, and then we changed the Modesty Panel. What was the first time we were in the Booten, and I actually think you talked about this with Chris. We were at the Booten Nights of Columbus, and I think Laura put the show on, and we played, and we always started with Walking Away.
Yeah.
And to this day, I remember how I always loved that intro because it was just like the straight ahead beat. And then we kind of like I rolled into the with this like off stutter like staccato drum and then a like a paradiddle like into the song, and then Chris would start with the lead guitar part.
Diddle, diddle,
Yeah, yeah,
diddle.
yeah. And it would like, but it would start with like 4 bars of us just playing like it was just the it was you on the bass, I think, playing the root note and me just playing the beat. And then Chris would come in with and Andy would play the rhythm on like the fourth bar in, and then we'd kick into the song with the lead guitar. And I loved opening a set like that. And my biggest draw into like the crowd and understanding that and having that sort of that feeling again going back to my cousin's garage was in Booton, and we started off with that, and like we had a ball. Nobody was singing our songs because we were like brand new, but like there was a good amount of people there, and people are like clapping and like pretty into it, and everybody's like enjoying it. The second song I think was like Andy's song, I think, or something like that. And I remember Andy saying something, and then like everybody's just like it was like dun, dun.
So what happened was, so Andy goes, so we played that song. I think it was called Something Else because I just sent you a link. The songs are on SoundCloud, and the whole album's there. Andy goes, so what happened was we started playing Walking Away. We actually get a crowd doing like they're like moshing in front of us, and then we end, and Andy's like, "Hey, if you guys love that song, you're gonna love this one." And we started playing Something Else, and it was like fucking crickets.
I remember that. But the funny thing about that is the like I also remember like in that scene at that time, like it was sort of new to everybody, but it almost felt like even with like humble beginnings, and I didn't hang out with them a lot, but I knew Chris Del Vecchio even more because Jay was friends with him. So like I got to see Chris sort of more often. I didn't see Josh that much, and Gabe I probably met once or twice. But like even with like Humble and like Shower of the Goats and like people that like I couldn't pick them out from anywhere at this point, but like just being at that time and being a small part of it was almost like everybody generally speaking wanted to help one another. I remember there was a zine, and like a week later there was like somebody that made a zine and did a review of that show, and I think we were the opening band, and like they were basically like Congress of Cow, just more of the same old same old. And I was like, that was my first bad review.
Yep, they were like, okay, first two things. One, the song was called Insubordination.
Okay, all
That
right.
was it. I believe that was it. Because I know Chris is probably gonna hear this. He's gonna
Yeah,
correct
because it
me.
was just it was like 4 notes
It was
dropping
so
down.
boring. It was one of the most boring songs. And then that was, I forget the name of that zine, but they were like, yeah. And then the crowd started moshing for Congress of Cow with like super vanilla, or like just shit on
Yeah,
us.
yeah, it was like basically like just generic pop punk, and then like I
Uh-huh.
guess the other bands that were there like got better reviews because I think Chris had it or we read it or something, and I was like, I mean, I didn't think of it, too much of it. It was just funny. It was my first introduction to like critic, like oh man, that's not what I felt. Like we played the first song and people were going nuts, and I was like, I had a great time. This was awesome. I'm going to do this again.
Well, what happened too is I think the next day we played at the Rockaway Legion Hall, some Legion Hall in Rockaway, which is super small. It was the night that I bought Hello Bastards by Lifetime because there was always that person in the back. But we played there, and I think of a picture of it, and we start playing, and we're like, everyone's gonna go crazy for us, and nobody did shit the whole time. And it was like that lesson of, oh, it's almost like a comedian. Like a comedian can kill it, and then the next night can completely bomb, but that is their career for the rest of their life. So it was like our like introduction to do this because you love it, but don't do this because you expect that the crowd's gonna fucking love you, which is what the road teaches you. Like you're saying, when you go on the road, it's the best of times and worst of times because the best of times because you get to do what you love, and then sometimes you get that show where it's a hit, and then it's the worst of times because you're also starving. You're driving 10 hours to play in front of three people, and you're just like, this sucks.
Right, you're like this is like the worst thing ever, and then you get to go on stage, and I imagine just like millions of us before, just it wears a lot of people down, and some of the people that can really sort of get through that are pretty impressive to me. Whether they ultimately make something of it or they don't, it's pretty impressive when people can do that, because I think even with us in Congress of Cal, I think that was part of it too for me, that like sort of wore down, like just even doing those small little things on the weekends a couple times as we started to try and take it a little bit more seriously, was just kind of like, man, I like I love playing the show, but it's hard to go and then play in front of like 10 people. When I met Jay, it was kind of like when we got back in and we started doing like I guess a more mature version or like an emo-ish thing. When we went back into it and started trying to take it seriously again, this is like 5, 6 years later, and we're like, man, the scene is totally different.
Oh
Like I
yeah.
was I was out of it for like 4 years, and I heard you talk about it, going to California or whatever, coming back, or maybe it was Chris or something like that, where the Jersey band's like having this sort of like attitude, because a lot of people were getting signed, and then it became like if everybody's so and so got signed, so then their brother got signed, and I was like, what is going on? And I'm totally outside of all this. I'm not a part of any of this. I'm going to college, and with my girlfriend, and I hear like bands here and there that I'll pick up from wherever. When we went back into it with Modesty Panel and started playing like Legion Hall shows, it was nothing like I remembered 4 or 5 years before that with you guys, or more, where it just seemed like everybody was generally nice to one another. They generally wanted to help one another. There's always people that would step on anybody, or had a plan per se.
No, you're right. Though there was more of a bond.
I remember like Rob going out to like see Weston a bunch of times, and I never went with him. But like I remember like that's what it felt like, dude. You drive to PA just to see a band you like, because like Got Beat Up, I love that record. Like okay, I like the songs. The guys seem pretty cool. And again, I didn't see him live until 2008. But like you would just sort of like go, or everybody would go to the shows and just be nice with everybody, and you'd have five bands at a show, maybe a headliner, maybe not, or a bunch of local shows, and everybody was like sort of supportive of one another and would hang around. And then like we did the Modesty Panel thing, and locally it was like the complete opposite. You would have 10 bands on a show. You'd have like everybody had their like 7 or 8 friends, but you literally played in front of your 7 or 8 friends. You were never, it was almost impossible to gain other fans,
Yeah.
because they would literally just hang out in the parking lot with their friends. And then like they would come in and they'd sort of have this like, there was this competition thing. I need to dress this way or look this way or act this way or play this way, because I want to be the next one from Jersey to get signed, so to speak. So we're going to dress this way or do this. It became so foreign to Jay and I, but yet we were trying to do the same thing. Like towards the end of it, I think we kind of like lost that a little bit, where we sort of lost ourselves in that wrapping up, because now you're turning into like 2005, 2004, 2005, 2006, and now it's fully exploded. And the subgenres are all in full explosion, and not exploitation, but there's a lot of means to get your name out there, or I know this person, so I got to do this. And it was a lot of that going on, and it was kind of like, and we missed a lot of that stuff. We missed a lot of those connections, but just the scene itself was like completely different. Like going from being 17 and playing the Boots and Knights of Columbus and having a great time, and even getting a bad review per se, but it was like, dude, like I love this. It's fun. People are nice to us, and it's sort of a collective, and like everybody's listening to everybody. And some bands are better than others, and they start pulling ahead a little bit, because they're more melodic. They are a little bit more poppy. They're a little bit more catchy, that kind of stuff. And some are less so. But then we came back into it and it was like, man, everybody is like competing against everybody else. And it's like nobody cares to learn a new band unless they're signed to a record label.
You know what? I wonder. I bet there has to be something to do with the whole download thing. I wonder if the fact that people, this is kind of relatable. Years ago, this is when I was living in Morristown. My sister dropped my nephews off and my niece, and I remember I had an old iPhone, so I just cleared it out and I gave it to my nephew, and I was downloading apps. The kid was, he was like 7 maybe at the time. He would play a game, and he'd play like, I would download like 10 games. He'd be like, all right, new games. I was like, Morgan, finish the ones you got, bro. But it was almost like a social experiment. You're watching this little kid understand technology, and it was just so fast, and you're going like, I have an opening to the entire universe right now. Like, why would I be stuck with this shitty little thing that I don't really love, and I'm not going to give it that much attention and really love it? I think that just kind of, maybe that whole, when Napster kicked in and you could download as much stuff as you wanted to, people, their minds started to speed up a bit, and they were like, all right, well, we don't have to sit here and watch this shit. if we don't like it. We're not going to give this any time because I can go out my phone or my iPod or whatever it was at the time and listen to 1,000 songs. Plus, I'm reading AP Magazine and they're telling me all these bands that are
Telling me
great.
what, yeah,
So,
right, exactly. Like telling me what to listen to.
yeah.
So it was, yeah, it was very interesting because then we eventually wanted to become that band in AP Magazine that you would want to listen to. And we had, certain connections here and there to different things. And it was one of those things that just sort of never coalesced and came together for us in terms of Modesty Panel.
I remember buying a Modesty Panel shirt back then, and I forget how I got it. And then I heard the story that you had just had a lot of savings, and you were like, "I'm gonna go for it. I'll take care of everything." And it sounds like you're right. I mean, it's like everyone's like, "Yeah, he just dropped a shit ton of money and on this CD, and then didn't work out."
Yeah, it was one of those things where like, after we were done, like it was my last semester at CCM, and for some reason I was in the like main area, which I'm never in because that's not where any of my classes were. I think I was waiting for transcripts because I wanted to be done, and then like I made like the honor society for engineering in county colleges. I guess that's the thing. so like, yeah, like I mean, like I think I got like a 3.7 or something in my 2 years there,
Jesus.
and I was ready to leave and just go do drafting. Like, okay, I got an associate's degree, I could go draft, and now I can make $15 an hour, and I'm gonna be living in it. Like this is awesome. I get to do something that I really enjoy doing. I was waiting for transcripts, and my professor came up and he called me into his office, and I went in, and he had the paperwork already signed to go to NGIT. And he's like, "You're already in, you're going." And I'm like, "I don't want to go." he's like, "You're going." I'm like, "I don't want to go." And he's like, "No," he's like, "You're too smart for this. You can't just do the associates. You're going to NGIT. You could commute from your parents' house." He's like, "I don't care. You're too smart. You're doing it. Sign the paperwork." So I sort of begrudgingly signed the paperwork. I'm glad I did it. I got my bachelor's degree in engineering, but what was funny is I had just come out of that meeting, and I'm like, "Oh man, I got 2 more years of this." Like, I was like, "Oh no." I was like, "What did I do?" I was like, "My parents are going to be so proud and so happy." But I was like, "Man, I got to go down to Newark, and I'm going to commute from Jefferson because I'm living with my parents." And I'm like, "I'm not staying there. I don't have the money to stay there. There's nothing there anyway." I was like, but I had literally just come out of that. It was like 99, and like I'm sitting in like the where I never am, in like some random like place at CCM to wait for my transcript, because he sent me down. He's like, "You got to go get your transcript and go get it and bring it back." And I'm just sitting there, like Jay and his buddy walk by. Like I'm literally sitting in the middle of this giant hallway, in the chairs, lounging, waiting for my transcript to be printed or something. And Jay walks by, and I look at him, and he looks at me, and I'm like, I can't place him. Like I know I've seen this kid before, and he looks at me. He looks like a punk rock kid. His buddy's kind of sort of dressed the same, and he's got a stack of CDs with him. He goes, "I know you." I was like, "You're Jay, right?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Did you play?" And I was like, "Congress of Cow." He's like, "Yeah, with Doyle and Parker." He's like, "Yeah, you were the drummer, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, Jeff." And he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And he's got a stack of CDs. So it turns out that he was doing like a radio show at CCM with his buddy who was going to CCM. And like that's how we met. And he was like, "Listen," he's like, "I guess they had just like kicked out Dave, one of the Daves."
Yeah.
One of the Daves. He's like, "Oh, do you want to play?" And I'm like, "Listen, all the stuff a year and a half earlier had gone down with you guys." And I was like, "I'd love to play, Jay, if it's just for fun. Like, I'll come over your house and play, drums." I was like, "I haven't touched my drums in 2 years. They're packed away." He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, no problem." So like I went over his house in Mountain Lakes, and I go down there, and he's there, and I guess Dave had left his drum set there because I didn't bring my drum set over. And Jay at that time, he gave me one of the jerk offs tape, and he's like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh, that's where I know him from." So he's like, "Just listen to this." So I learned the whole tape because that's just who I am. I'm just like, "Oh, I got this. I absorbed it. I put my drums back together. I played. I learned, their entire tape that they had." And like I go over and I walk down, and Jay is so friendly. He's so
Yeah.
nice. Like he could talk to anybody. Generally speaking, like he has the gift of gab. He definitely does. And he was so accommodating. He's like, "Oh yeah, his mom was home. She was really nice. And they're like, "Oh, we're gonna play for a little while." So I go downstairs, and then there's Doug, and Doug is like, and Doug was the nicest person, but Doug was totally like a little bit more into that jerk off style. Like, I don't want to say hardcore, but like he was more like the ethics kid, and like I definitely have the punk rock ethics and appreciate that I learned all that stuff in the DIY. And to this day, I'm 100% that way. But like, just figure it out yourself, like you don't need anybody else. And Doug was totally into that. And I remember looking at Doug and Doug looking at me and just going, this isn't going to work. Because like I come down and I look like a jock. I work out and Doug is Doug, and Doug was very nice. He was very nice to me. Doug is very soft spoken. He's one of those kids where like if there was like that random like pause or jab to be had that was hilarious, that was sort of Doug. We couldn't be further apart in who we were as people. We had a love of the same style of music, but like he was working like delivering like auto parts and I was going to college and I like was working out, and Doug always seemed like he was sick and he was always taking Excedrin every hour. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with this kid? But like, and again, Doug was always very nice to me, but like, it was one of those things where immediately he looked at me and he's like, seriously? Like I walked down the stairs and I was like, seriously? Who's gonna be the drummer for the Jerk Offs? So I played the whole album with them, and we're just like, yeah, we'll play. And we played some local shows, and you could see that the scene had definitely changed. And then, slowly Doug kind of like got to a point where I think he decided he wanted to go in a different direction. I think he wanted to do the more like obscure, probably is not the right word, of like punk rock, but kind of not the poppy, like or emo-ish direction that we were starting to sort of turn into.
He was like more like the crusty punk kind of thing, right?
I think so, if I remember right. And again, he was always very nice, but I think he just sort of stopped showing up and then basically eventually just said, yeah, I don't want to play in the Jerk Offs anymore. And then because Doug was gone, it was just Jay. It took time. It was like 3 years that we would just sort of play out. And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of fun. And then I was working at a college. I couldn't get a job in engineering because it was right after 2000, right after September 11th happened. And I was trying to get a job in engineering, and everybody wanted they wanted experience right away. They were like, oh, you have to have experience. I'm like, I just graduated. So I wound up like doing a leave replacement at Jefferson High School as a teacher, like the engineering teacher or drafting teacher. And I did that for a couple months. And then I got a full-time gig at Mendham High School. Through that time with Jay, and we morphed into Modesty Panel, and like, Lois's brother Anthony was in the band for a little while, and we had this.
Was he really?
Kid. Yeah, he was for a little bit.
Oh, shit.
He was really heavy into the Get Up Kids. Like he really got into the Get Up Kids, and he wasn't so much into other stuff, but for some reason he like latched onto that band. He played rhythm guitar for us for a little while. I think Headley filled in for a show here and there. We had a bass player like Derek, who was in, I want to say Slick. Shorty, right? Yeah, Derek. It was Smalls. So Derek was in there for a little bit. We recorded, and then we started to like get a little bit more serious because when I got the job at Mendham High School to be the engineering teacher, I moved in with Jay. So I lived with Jay in Boonton on Main Street, at the top of the hill. So like right down the hill from the nice of Columbus, and things had kind of changed because they weren't having shows there anymore. And we're like, oh, what's going on? So we like really like Jay sort of like, and we really connected because we had a really fond and tight connection with melody and writing music. We were basically on the same page for what we liked, and we were heavily into Green Day. And that was melodic paradise to us. How do you write words and melodies that fit the chords so well? And we had a love for that, and that sort of kind of came in together. And then like one of the kids I actually taught at Jefferson, Mikey Belveduto, who played in a couple of other bands later on, like he came and played, and he was like a great lead guitarist. And when he came on and I heard him play, and we recruited him to play, and then we got Brian Granick to be in the band, I was like, wow. I was like, the four of us, like, this is pretty good. We have like Brian is a pretty good bass player. Jay can play pretty well. At that time, like I thought I was a good drummer, above average on my best day. And then Mikey like had this like just amazing way to tie a lead guitar into almost everything we did, and it was melodic, and it was like we put together like an EP and we started playing, and I was like, wow. And that's when it just all came back and hit me again. And I was at Mendham for 3 years, and they actually offered me tenure, and I turned it down. And I was like, no, we're going to go on tour. I was like, because to your point where you got angry per se or mad at me because that happened. I was like, I had worked as a teacher for 3 years. I did nothing but save my money and live with Jay on Main Street in Boonton and go through, following him around and meeting all these other people from Kinnelon and, Boonton and that crazy sort of scene that was going on, not punk rock per se, but like, just in general. And we started getting like more serious about it. And I was like, after my third year, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be 24 or 25. I have some money saved. We kind of met together and we said, like, if we put some money into this, maybe we can make it work. And I can't regret that decision, putting the money and backing it and, starting our own record label and doing it and trying to figure it out. It just, like I said, we had some small connections here and there and never came to fruition. We played with My Chem, when they literally first started out. And then I think Frank was in Pensy Prep and then moved over to My Chem. And like I had kept in touch with them via their email. And then like they, like a year later, they had the Vampire song. And I remember Jay and I listening to it and going like, I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like literally. And I probably almost everybody in the scene probably says that.
Oh, I've said that so many times. Yeah.
We listened to it and we're like, they kind of look. The sound is just not there. Like, but they were really nice guys. And like, I tried to keep in contact with them. And then literally like a year later, Bloomfield Ave Cafe was gigantic at that time. Everybody, you try to play there as much as possible. And we were trying to play there. We played there a bunch of times. Jay moved to like really close to there. And we had played there a bunch of times. And literally like the one night they're playing and the line is like down the hill. Like it was crazy. And Jay and I are like, what we're like, who's playing tonight? We're like walking by. Like, who's playing tonight? They're like, oh, My Chemical Romance is playing. We're like, you're kidding. And then obviously I'm Not Okay came out and I was like, they figured it out. Like that album is
I've
awesome.
said the same thing so many times. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a song my wife likes and she's not really into it. It's just because for her it's all about the repeated choruses, and the catchiness, and that song is amazingly catchy, and a bunch of songs on that album. And I was like, oh, crazy. But like, even when Chris started Day at the Fair, I don't know how Chris and he was recording the album for Rushmore. And somehow, like, I might have called him or he called me or something like that. Or he was like, oh, he's like, yeah, we're recording the album right now. He's like, I have the piano track for the first track of the CD or for the album, like down. He's like, but I suck at the piano. He's like, you know how to play. He's like, and he gave me the track and I basically rewrote it, and I just like, I mean, I kept the chords, but I gave it, flow, intricacy, per se, and just is what Chris wanted. He's like, just make it not sound like chords. I was like, okay. So like, so I went down.
Was this for No Lights on Weldon?
No, this is for the Rushmore. For
What? I
yeah,
didn't know you played on that. Okay, sorry, go on.
yeah. So the first and last tracks I played piano on that album, and yeah, so yeah, No Lights on Weldon came out, and like I had heard it, and I was like, okay, this is okay, like I heard Lanemeyer. I think I like the first track on the Lanemeyer CD. Correct me if I'm wrong. The first track on the Lanemeyer CD after we broke up is really closely related in chord structure, except for the breakdown, to one of the Congress of Cow songs that we did. And I want to say it's CK1 or something really similar.
Yeah, it was.
It's literally you guys rewrote the song, but then put a breakdown in it. And what I heard, or somebody told me, and I don't know where I got this from, and it's probably completely irrelevant, but somebody told me that because CK1 was so fast, like I guess Sean wasn't used to playing that fast, so you like brought it down, or I don't know if you guys were going for a different pop punk sound or whatever.
No, he couldn't play it that fast. That was like
Okay.
we stopped playing that song because it was just so fast. Even though like Me and You in the Big Screen, which is the first song on the EP, which you're talking about, and then Shitty Summer, which is a Chris other song that's like kind of similar to that one. The whole album is fast. Like I mean, I wrote like songs I wrote are fast, but for some reason CK1 was so fast. And I think that's what we auditioned Sean with, was that and Walking Away. But he was just like, Can we write some slower songs?
But yeah, like, but even with Chris, like, somehow we reconnected, and he's like, "Oh, I'm in the middle of recording the album for." I knew I had heard he, like, I got all this stuff secondhand because I was not in it at all, and like I had heard, as we started getting back into it a little bit, I heard he was like doing. He was out a drive through, and then he was like trying to get signed or be a songwriter, and I was like, okay, that's cool, And he did Day at the Fair, and I heard I got a copy of No Lights on Weldon, and I was like, okay, this is pretty good, but it's not recorded that well. I was like, it's okay, like, all right, like somehow we got in touch, and he was like, oh yeah, can you play the piano tracks to the opening track? And I was like, sure, and he gave it to me. I kind of recomposed it a little bit. I sent it back to him, and he's like, yeah, that's perfect. He's like, come in and record. And I recorded the tracks, and I was like, that Eastern, I was like, I get it. Like, it sounds good, and I'm glad he gets to record this, so it sounds really good. And
Yeah.
when he came out, I think I went to Best Buy. I bought like 5 copies of the album. Um, I was like, oh, like, I really want to help him out. I was like, whatever's ever happened in the past, and not that it was ever egregious. I mean, come on, like it was one of those things where I was like, I listened to it and it was cool because I was on the, I was like, oh, cool, I'm actually on a track that's in Best Buy, or whatever. And I was like, I hope he went somewhere with it. But like as we did our own thing, we decided to start the own record label. And I said, like, listen, if we can kind of put some money together, I think we can go record our own thing. We had met a guy named Mike DeSalvo.
Yeah,
Um,
I know Mike.
yeah, and Mike D and I lost touch with him, and I love Mike D. He was another crazy character I always was following after. I love it. I miss all those guys, but like, and Mike was like interning at Showplay Studios in Dover, and behind, it was like a recording studio behind the strip club. Like he was doing there. Somehow we met him. We did our 4-song EP with him, like at nighttime when he got like studio, and then he and Jay got to be like pretty good friends, and then we all started hanging out. And he had a similar vision. He had a very clear vision of what he wanted to do. He wanted to engineer, record, and produce, and like do that. That was his deal, and he got better and better at it. And I was like, listen, I was like, Mike, and I don't know what Mike's doing now. I hope he's doing well, but like if he's doing anything meaningful and really big, like I would say to him, you're welcome. For starting his career. It was like, because I put the money out to do the full length, and we bought a good amount of studio time, and we recorded at a bunch of places. We got it mixed and mastered, and put the money out for that, and and then like put the money out to do like to find a booking agent and do that stuff, and press kits, and we went the whole nine. Like we went all out.
Yeah, you did. I remember this.
Yeah. And we just never could find it. Even with Chris, like I talked to him after doing the tracks, and I hope he appreciates it. Like I don't feel like I was being used or anything like that, but like I remember talking to him, and then those guys were going on tour with Houston Calls and Alistair. It was like their first tour. We had tried to book this tour for like a couple months at a time, and we just could not get anything going. We met up with them down in Texas. So like we took our van, we did a radio show and played in Monmouth. And then we drove all the way to Texas to meet them because like I had talked to Chris, and I was like, listen, can you get us as an opening act on the thing? And he was like, I believe, if I remember, maybe I'm wrong, but like I think he said yeah or something like that. And we're like, okay, well, we have dates coming back to the East Coast, so we can figure that out. We were going to go from Texas over to Florida and then come back to the East Coast and then to the Midwest and then back. And we probably had like 15, 18 dates. And we were like, okay, if we drive to Texas, Chris, like could we hook up with you guys there? And then maybe we could follow you guys, because they were going like to California and up and around and whatever with the tour. And we get down there and we meet up with him, and I'm talking to him, and it came up pretty quick because I was pretty straightforward. I was like, listen, and he was like, well, listen, I don't know if it was Drive Through or Rushmore or whatever. They were like, well, they just want our bands on the thing, so you can't like follow us around and just open up for us. We were playing a show in San Antonio at the White Rabbit, and I think we played the day after, and they played the day before. And he's like, "Yeah, sorry, man, you can't be like an opening act." And I don't know if he ever said we could, or maybe I was just hoping, or like whatever. And then so we're down in Texas, and we're like, okay, well, we got a road back, and we're doing this. And then we just like every single show, we were busting our butts to try and find shows on our way home in between other shows. And we were all over Texas, and then we were up in Oklahoma, and everybody was like super, super nice, and it was totally different than Jersey. Like it was crazy. Like there would be like 50, 60 kids at a show. They would buy stuff. They
Damn.
were super nice. They'd let you like sleep on, we slept on people's floors and whatever, and this is after 3 years of me like working as a teacher, and taking a shot. I'm like, okay, this is cool. We're going, we're doing this, but we have 1,000 CDs with us and we've sold like 100,
Oh,
like,
man.
so it's like, so it's like Jay did all the artwork. He put so much time and effort into him. And I was like a taskmaster. Like I became the guy like that was like, no, this Jay, you got to get it done. Like, stop screwing around. Like, I don't care about your other stuff. This is the most important. And I lost myself. I just completely lost everything that I ever thought about back to meeting you guys and playing in my basement for the first time. We had literally like the second night, I think, after we found out we weren't going to be able to follow them. And that night we were on Day at the Ferris bus with Chris, and Steve was sitting in the front. And I vaguely remember because Steve had like a set of dumbbells for some reason in the front of the tour bus. And I think I was joking with him because at that point, like Steve, like there was, there's no competition at that point. You're doing your thing. It was more like a high school kind of thing. And I remember talking to him and listening. And the guys from Alistair and the guys from Day at the Fair and the guys from Houston Call, like they're sitting on the tour bus, and it's like it was one of the first nights of their tour. They've been on tour for like a week, and we're like this green band, from Jersey, and we're like, oh, maybe we could, be your opening band, and we're so excited to be on tour. And every word out of their mouths was negative. This sucks. Rushmore hasn't promoted the show. There's only 150 people here, and nobody cares, and nobody's buying merch, and the record label's doing nothing for us. And like my eyes got so wide open at that point because I'm sitting there going, we want to be where they are. This is how they feel. That realization to me was just like huge. And the night later, the night following, we played a venue called the White Rabbit in San Antonio, and we played the night after in this other place, and they let us stay at the venue overnight. They were super nice, and they're like, "Yeah, we're just gonna lock up. You guys can go sleep in the loft because you're gonna play tomorrow night." And Jay and I had this like gigantic blowout fight, like literally the second day of tour. After that realization of listening to the guys on tour that were where I thought I wanted to be at this, like at least signed, and there's a tour and you have a booking agent and a manager, you have 200 dates booked to do this. This is where we want to be. And this is what they're talking about. Like they're just jaded as everybody else back in New Jersey, where nobody wants to like see each other's bands at like the Pequannock Legion Hall. It was crazy. And then the next night, Jay and I had like a big, blowout fight about something to this day that I'm not proud of, and really kind of changed my view on a lot of things, sort of politically and worldview, without getting into it. And Jay literally hated me. I mean, because like I basically did something that sort of didn't break his spirit, but was like disheartened him to the point where he was just like, wow, I can't believe I'm in like a punk or emo band with a kid like this. And I had to like, it was definitely a man in the mirror kind of thing. And I had to walk on eggshells for the next like week to kind of calm down. And like, that was my first ever like tour, and we go up to Oklahoma and we go across Louisiana and, through Alabama and Mississippi, and we go play a couple places in Florida. And we played Sean's record store, and he was very nice, and different things like that. We stayed with my cousins down there, and it got a little bit better. And we came up to the Northeast, and like all of our Midwest states, like just like canceled on us. And I had paid money to get a booking agent to book us shows. And like, he got us like 7 shows, and it took him like 4 months to get us those 7 shows. So it was clearly the wrong person. Nowhere in our scene was booking us in stuff that we were like, he's like, oh yeah, I got you into this theater in Chicago, that seats like 1,200 people. And we're like, it's going to be the 4 of us. Like, what are you talking about? like, but it was also that time, like with MySpace, where it was like fake it till you make it. Like spend hours friending people on MySpace, like just to like, and having people like, who are you? Like whatever. Like, and the other final thing that hit home, we were like in Alabama, and like there's literally us and 2 other bands. And one of the bands was this like really avant-garde, either brother, sister, or boyfriend, girlfriend thing, this crazy, weird thing. And like they're playing, and this girl on MySpace was like, oh, I'm in Alabama, I'm coming to the show, I can't wait to see you. And she shows up, and it's like, when you just meet people and you can just read them right away what they're thinking. Yeah. It's written all over their face. and there's literally 5 people there, and she got there early because she thought there was just going to be this like huge line, and she thought she was going to be on and we put her on the guest list. So she was super stoked about being on the guest list. And she shows up like half hour early. And like, it's literally us, this other like band, this other band, and like a metal band. You could just see it on her face. Like, oh my God, I was totally like duped, catfished, like whatever the word is at that point. Like, and she like was very nice and she stayed. One of the guys like hitting on her or something like that, and she was totally not into it and ended up going home with like this other guy because she had lived like 45 minutes away. And I felt so bad. I was like, wow, how bad do I feel like of like false advertising, And it was just like,
my
it,
God.
it was just all of those experiences that just like hit me all the time. The thing with Jay, the thing with Chris, the thing with the guys on the tour bus, her basically canceling the shows out in Chicago because of like, they're like, well, you got to have at least 200 people. And we're like, what are you, like, I'm like, what are you talking about? Nobody knows who we are, and then the flip side of it as well, too, the downside, which I'm sure, well, and the craziness that kind of goes on with it of like, trying to meet people and sleep on floors and do stuff like that. And the crazy things that ensue that are just not me, in terms of like the drinking, the drugs, the girls. My wife and I were together at the time. We actually met at Mendham when I first started. So she went through this whole thing. We were boyfriend and girlfriend through this entire period. And then we got married later on. But that wasn't me. It was getting back to what you and I talked about. It was about the music. It was about playing the show. And that's why it was the best and worst times, even through all of that stuff, getting on stage, and getting past the thing with Jay per se, and then playing was amazing. But then having everything, just every connection just completely fall apart and scrambling to try and make all these connections and doing all of this work and putting all this money out to just like say, you know what, let's just do it ourselves and figure it out and follow the lead of our forefathers, so to speak. And it just like all coming and crashing and coming home and having nothing, and then just going like, I gave up a teaching career for this, and I don't regret that by any means. My wife and I lived in a small place we rented in Montville, and they had a garage in the back, and we came back and I made it into a practice studio because the people we rented from us said, yeah, you can do that if you put it back to a garage later on. So I did all this construction work and made it into a studio. We practiced in there, and we started writing and recording the second album. And we really kind of started hitting a stride where we were like writing songs that, like the first album that we did and re-recorded, I recorded one piano track on, and like I really liked it, but like, how do you play the piano? Like my whole life is like, how do you play piano in a punk rock band? Like unless you're the lead and you're going to sing. I never attempted to do that because I felt like, well, then who's going to play the drums? And so it just, you can never make it work. And I had all these ideas. We started recorded a couple songs, and we're like, wow, this is like, we're hitting a groove here where we're trying to figure out who we were. Because the first album, it was a bunch of like songs that we had been playing locally for a while. And then Jay just stopped showing up. Like it was just like, the beginning of 2006. And I think we all kind of realized Brian was always there for fun and he enjoyed it. And like, we had a great time. And, when we hit with the music, it was the same thing, even with you and Chris, and Andy. It was when we hit it and we had a great time and we enjoyed it and the music was going, it was always amazing. And then the outside BS that comes with it. And, for Jay and I, because we're so similar in certain ways in terms of musically and the aesthetic of music and the things that we kind of really liked at that time. But then like, we still had that like kind of Jersey in us. We were just sarcastic idiots. We would just be sarcastic with one another and just eventually start getting angry with one another because we were trying to out sarcastic the other one, where it's no longer funny, it's hurtful. We got into a lot of that stuff, and Brian was sort of on the side, and and Brian would show up, and then he and I'd be sitting there, and Jay was living down across from the city, I think in Gutenberg, like right above Hoboken, Guttenberg or whatever, and he had a place there, and he had to like drive to Montville to like come to practice, and then he just kind of like, I think he saw sort of like a way out, and he's always done the artistry, and I think he's an amazing artist. But there were certain things where like the vision, I think, just stopped clicking, and we had written a contract and basically said like, the money that we were going to bring in from tour comes back to me. And then they got angry about that. So you get into the business side of it, and it was like, wow, that they're like, well, how are we going to eat on tour? I'm like, dude, I put out like, the money for the shirts for this, and this. I should recoup that. And it was that, mistake that like I just look back on and go, and not to say anything would have been ever any different by any means, but like it was just like, wow, and after that I really had to take a good hard look at myself in the mirror and just go, is this what you want? Is this what you want to do? Is this something you want? Or was it the whole time you just wanted to do what you wanted to do? And then I never had a friend after that.
Got it.
I mean, like it's sort of half-heartedly joking, but I mean, I haven't, really. I mean, I think I saw you guys at the Lanemeyer thing in 2008. I think I called Chris. My wife and I bought a house in Roxbury, like right as the financial crash was hitting, and we stayed there for a little while and took a big financial hit on that, and basically had to move back to an apartment and start all over again. We went through that, but like I remember being in Landing and I was recording in the basement because I had all their stuff. It was still there, and they just kind of left it. I started playing the bass, I started playing guitar, and I started writing and recording my own things. And it was funny getting back. That's where sort of like the Gaslight Anthem kind of came in, and I heard that randomly. And I had been out of it and not paying attention to anything for like 4 years. And I was like, wow, I was like, this is kind of like, I mean, if you always remember in terms of like even high school, the white t-shirt and the jeans, and sort of like I enjoyed Springsteen.
I was
you know,
just gonna say it must have been the Springsteen
yeah,
part that
yeah,
attracted you.
and stuff like that, and like in that, when I heard that, it kind of really connected with me. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool because it's got like that punk rock vibe, but it's very like homage to like the '60s rock and roll and stuff like that. And it kind of hit me, and I was like, you know what, screw it, I should start doing my own thing. And I don't remember if I reached out to you. I don't think I did, but I think I reached out to Rob Heiner to be like, hey, would you record some tracks? And I reached out to Chris like once or twice about like, listen, I can play power chords, like, and I could get the rhythm stuff down, but like for somebody to play anything meaningful, could you help me out? And like, I think both of them were sort of like, Rob was like, I don't want to go on tour. He's like, if this is where it's going, like he flat out was like, I don't want to ever do that again. And I was
What
like,
year was this? What year did you was this?
8, 9, 10, somewhere in there.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Flat out, like he's like, listen, Jeff, he's like, I appreciate it. He's like, well, I don't think I want to record because if this is going where I think it's going, no. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, you want to hang out? And he was like, I think he was doing something with computers, and like, okay, like I don't know if we ever got together or not. And then Chris and I never got together, and I haven't seen Chris in a long time. I think since I've seen you, and it was the same thing with Chris. It was just kind of like it was similar. I think he was coming off at the day at the fair thing, sort of just all ending. Yeah, I don't know what the story is with that, but like, and he was just kind of like, I think he was completely done with it too. And here I am with this, like, hearing this band and getting this, reinvigorated to like, you know what, I'm gonna finally do the piano stuff. I'm gonna combine, Green Day and Springsteen and Billy Joel, like, and that's gonna be me. And then like just remember like going to all of my former friends and just getting shot down and being like, nah, not interested. And then like literally going to, like, I literally went like to Craigslist. I like put like advertisements out, and nobody wanted to play with me. I was like,
God.
and so has gone the rest of my life.
Honestly, man, I would say that that was a hard ass time to be doing that because that was for the scene itself has obviously morphed into its next stage and next phase and blah blah blah. Like even now it's in a brand new phase compared to where it was like 5 years ago. Because I know geographically at that time, Chris was what the hell? He was dating Jamie, his wife now, but he like they were starting to date, so all of his time I think was going to that. And he was trying. So when they got back from tour, I knew like Rob and Chris were in massive debt, and then they moved out to Wilkes Barre at some point. I know that was afterwards. Like they were trying to. Chris was trying to dig himself out of like some shit. I think like, just like debt, just stupidly with credit cards and stuff. And then like I think they were so fried from fucking playing music and having it just completely like having it completely just fail because that was the big shot. And also, I think before you said was Todd the one they were going to kick out, but I think it was my buddy Sean who was playing bass at that time with who they kicked out before the Rushmore CD. Um, but yeah, man, I don't think I would have taken offense to that. I mean, I can't even get Chris to text me back now. Like, I'll ask him a question, and like a week later he responds. I'm like, is there a delay between we're on the same coast? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, for a long time, like it was funny because like one of the girls that I co-teach with now for one of our classes, and I have really smart kids in my class. Like I have like the top kids, and so it's really fun what I do, and I really appreciate it. But it was funny because like it is like there's only been two times like outside of that stuff where like I've met people in my career that had any connection to any of this. So it's like it's very rare and very like, oh wow, that's amazing. And then we get to become like pretty good friends because of it. But it's like because you talk to anybody, a thousand people on the street, like one of them will know what any of this was or talk about per se, and especially like in my field, and and I coached football for a while. Like I ran the weight room for a while, strength and conditioning coach, and I was all into that as well too. So I totally like went the opposite direction and just put all of this out of my head. And it never can. It will never ever leave me. I mean, like to this day, like I said, music to me is like a mistress. It will never ever. You have those moments in time which are amazing. Where you write something or I come up with something and I play the piano and I put it down on my phone and I record it in the basement, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't sound the way it sounds in my head, like the girl I work with, there was two, like Dave Coster, I worked with at Madison. I was at Madison High School for a little while, and Dave Coster was the bass player at Jettison.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, and Dave's like this unassuming guy with glasses, and like we talked together for like 3 years, and one day we're just sitting there, and he was just really nice, and he was fun, and we're joking around, we're talking about like Always Sunny, the show at the time, and we're just like, he's like, oh, you got to watch the show, it's amazing. We sort of bonded over that, and like, I was like, oh, do you play music? Because at that time I was just looking for anybody to play with music with. He's like, oh yeah, I play the bass, so he recorded some bass tracks for me. And I was like, he's like, oh, I was in Jettison. I was like, what? So then I went through my history with him. He's like, oh yeah. So like, and then like, I left Madison a little bit after that. So I haven't really seen Dave too much after that. And then the second time was like the girl I work with now. Like we've been teaching together for 10 years, but like we never really knew each other. So we started teaching together for the first time this year. And it turns out like half of her family was in the scene. Like it was just like the craziest thing. She's like my brother Stefan Niewashinsky was in the Holy Mess. I was like, okay. And and then we started like talking about this like literally like 2 weeks ago before I even caught your podcast. And like she starts rattling off all this stuff. She's like, oh yeah, my brother's the drummer of this band and he plays with Matt Skiba in from Alkaline Trio or Blink or whatever, in a band that just like when they all get together, I forget what the name is.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I forget what it
Not
is.
Heavens. It's his other
No,
one that he does. Yeah.
yeah, like so he's the drummer. That's her like her brother-in-law.
Oh
And
wow.
I was just like, I was like, what the hell? Like this whole thing. Because I vaguely Brian knew Zach from Split 50,
Yeah.
and then like, I guess her brother-in-law was in a band or like knew Zach, but then I guess apparently Zach is not a nice person, and I guess took a lot of money. And I never really knew Zach. I mean, I met him like once or twice because Brian knew him, and then I think Brian did like roadied the Warped Tour with Zach's stage for a little while after Modesty Panel was done, and so we were talking about that, and she launched into this whole diatribe about Zach and Split 50, and like how her family's not fond of him, and I was just like, I don't know, but like
Oh wow.
it was funny, but like literally in 10 years or 12 years, it's like two people that I've met that have any connection whatsoever to like.
It's funny you mentioned Dave because Dave, I don't know if he's still listening, but when I started the podcast, he was like huge, like I hate to say the word fan, like he listened to it like all the time. We did a reunion show in 2018, and because of this podcast, like the conversation started, we re-released our first record on vinyl. Rob from Midtown put it out on his label, which is so crazy because now me and Rob are friends. And I interviewed him and Heath and was like, "Hey, I'm sorry for like talking so much shit about Midtown back in the day, like doing my penance basically." But Jettison, they played, and Dave, he actually made like a logo of my podcast logo and he had it on the front of his bass.
Oh, for the reunion show?
It was so crazy. Like he just was really into it, and because in the whole first 30 episodes or first 28 episodes are strictly about the Jersey scene. Didn't talk to anybody outside of that, and then I branched outside. So
Yeah, I saw like yeah, because the ones with Chris and Jay were like within that.
yeah, they're like all the way in the beginning.
It was great, it was great to hear and stuff like that. But yeah, like I mean, going back to Jefferson, I mean, like yeah, it it's one of those things. I'm not a sentimental person. I'm always looking forward, and I try to like maybe I suppress things sometimes. That's why I work out. It's a stress reliever for me. I get angry about all this stuff. No, I don't. But like, otherwise, if I didn't work out, I'd throw people out a window. Um, but like, but it's one of those things where it's just like it's the random. There's moments and points in times where a random song will come on that I haven't heard, through whatever, and it'll make me think about like you or Chris or Andy or Rob or or being in Bob's red car that is completely illegal for the road and had the oh crap handle.
Yep.
And I probably rode in Bob's car like 2 times. Like sometimes it's nice to like sort of reminisce and go back. In all truthfully, it'd be fun. I think about it. I'm like, maybe I should call, and then I don't.
Well, you're also, I mean, like I've through the years, like I've always searched Facebook or something to try to find you to connect. So it was so cool the other day to get that email, which is so awesomely the subject is "We Lift," which is a Conquer the Cow song, and I see that, and I think it was a second after it hit my inbox, I hit you back, and I was like, dude, you gotta be on this thing because like we need to catch up.
I really appreciate it. Like I said, it's going to be your lowest rated podcast, and nobody's going to care because nobody knows who I am. But like, I do appreciate it. It's always fun to catch up. I know you're down in North Carolina and stuff like that. But like, at some, we always say like, I mean, even like I haven't talked to Jay and Brian. I think Brian called me, and I feel bad like a year ago, and I never called him back. And my wife's like, call Brian back. Call him back. Call him back. I'm like, I don't know. What are we gonna talk about? Like Brian's doing his thing. I'm like, I don't know. Like it just brings up a lot of stuff that like I'm not proud of in some respects, and in some stuff, in some ways, I shouldn't think that way. I think sometimes, and like and Jay, I haven't talked to, in 10, 12 years. We have a place up in Maine. We built a summer house up in Maine because both my wife and I are teachers. And so we have the summers off. She's been going up there since she was born. And so we now have a summer house up in Maine that we built ourselves. And we were up in Maine, and I was like building it, and like Jay randomly like text me out of nowhere after like 5 years. He's like, "Oh, I'm in this band. I need my guitar and my bass and my my Marshall half stack." And I'm like, it's in my wife's parents' basement in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So if you want to go get it, you're more than welcome. But I'm not in Maine. So like I had to call my brother-in-law and be like, "Hey, can you let this kid Jay in?" So I guess Jay drove out and got it, and I don't know what he was using it for, but like whatever, it's his. So like I'm not gonna steal his stuff, but and it was the whole like with Jay, it's always like, oh yeah, we should get together, and it's like sometimes it's like, yeah, you just wanted your guitar stuff, like because I haven't heard from him since. But in all fairness, I also have a phone, and I have not reached out either. For Jay and I, there's certain things like that we definitely see eye to eye on, but I think there's other things that we don't. There's certain things where we're so similar as people, and certain things where we're so different.
I that was the one thing with Mossy Panel when I saw you were in it, I was like, I just as much as it made sense for you to be in Conquers a Cow, which made total sense to me, Jay was so opposite of you. So I was like, I don't understand how this works, but I think it works because they're two very nice guys and they both just love music. So that's what I'm thinking the connection is there.
Yeah, and that really has what it's always come down to. And like I said, like we would always try to out sarcastic one another. And Jay, in that sense, is much wittier than I am and much faster.
Yeah, he is like he's a sharpshooter and he's also really smart and that's a dangerous combo.
And it's funny too because and maybe I don't know if I've ever told him that, but like to his face, he absolutely is. I mean, and there was a certain amount of street smarts that were there as well as educational. Even though Jay didn't do the traditional education, the combination of he is very good at tying a lot of different things together. And as much as he'll like sort of downplay it or self-deprecating per se, but like yeah, and that was the one of the things that really attracted me to him as well too, was the love of the music, the understanding of like the music, and just like politics and things like that, where it was just like I was brought up very conservative and listening to conservative radio and going to church, and that in my life is so far the opposite of who I am now. And a big portion of like that blowout fight was about stuff like that, and a mistake I will say I made, just of total ignorance of my 24-year-old self. And like, and hearing him talk, and now being being who I am, and my wife is similar ethos in those sense, in that sense as well. Like it was just really like, I'm not gonna say Jay was ahead of his time, but for me it was kind of like it took me a long time to come around to realize a lot of things that Jay was sort of already knew, for some ways, out of tragedy, which sucks, and it's something you can never get back. But like, I think that's where our connection was. It was the music right away. It was the connection to Green Day, and I think he has vision for his music and for his art that to this day, I think the way that I feel about music and the way I describe it as being a mistress, and like it will never, as well as I can probably ever record my songs, they'll never be the way I see the colors and things in my head. I would probably 100% say that Jay probably feels the same way, not only about music but his art as well too. I think he like gets these fantastic things and like does them to a point and just gets frustrated because it's just never for both of us. I think we had that very similar image where like it's almost unattainable. And it's so frustrating, sometimes where it's like you get this thing and you're so jazzed about it, and then like, oh, but it's not what it's in my head. And I think we really clicked on that portion of it. And like I said, it was just, to me, I always felt like the Sal Paradise character. I was just always following guys like that around because that's not my personality, and just sort of like seeing where it went. And sometimes it was amazing, and more times than not, it was annoying. And like I kind of came back to normal life per se, and then I got the itch again, and went out again, like with you guys. It was like, cool, I'm part of a crew, and we play music, and we're doing these little tours on the weekends, and like, oh, I'm following these guys around, and this is really really cool. And then like that ended, and then sort of Jay and I sort of like slowly got back into that, to the point where we tried it again, and it was the same thing. It's like, let me follow this guy around, and we click on this one thing like really really well, and just but like a lot of other things we don't. And like and then it's like follow him around, and it's like, okay, that ends, and then you sort of go back to regular life. And that's sort of the on the road thing, for me. And I guess that's why I connect so much with that book, is because that person is always out there for me, or my mistress. And now I guess it's just music in general, it's always there.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's like the thing that I never gave up was I always had like I can connect with the fact that you're saying like there's that thing in your head, but like I also kind of like let go of this perfection. I never was really like a perfectionist. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna fucking do it and put it out there. That's why I do so many things. Like I do a bunch of shit because I'm like I'm just gonna constantly do this stuff all the time, and because I need to do it, and so I just do it. And sometimes I want to connect it to some kind of success where it goes somewhere, and the other times I just look at it and I'm like the only one who's gonna see this, or the couple people that follow me on Instagram are gonna see this, and I just think this is I get a kick out of this. So it's like you can't. I don't think if something's in your head, you just got to keep doing it until the damn thing's out, and you do it. And or sometimes you realize that like maybe it's the thing that you're thinking and you're trying to produce isn't the outlet of what it is isn't the actual medium, the right medium. So maybe the song isn't supposed to be music, maybe it's supposed to be something else that you're supposed to do, like I don't know. Like I think that everyone's always meant to be doing something good, but they try to force the thing that they want it to be, and then they just trip over the other thing that works, and they're like, oh fuck, it's that, and I'm getting the enjoyment out of this that I was trying to get out of that, and this seems to be working so much better.
And I think sometimes I forget that because I basically, for 10 years have generally suppressed that. And I'll have these moments and times where I just go crazy and I'll play the piano for 2 hours and I'll write a song and record it. I just have these huge visions in my head. And then, yeah, this isn't going to go anywhere because of my past experience. And who cares what I think at this point, you know? So it's not going to go anywhere. I know that's a terrible way to look at it. Oh, and then I have this list of to do things that I also enjoy, like I do construction work and stuff like that, you know, and I enjoy making things better looking and being better than the way I found them, not only through my students, you know, but like houses and, you know, flipping houses and building things and constructing things and, you know, remodeling things because when it's done, I love that satisfaction.
See, that's what I'm trying to get to is I think that the thing that you get that from is the thing you're already doing, and I think you might just be blind to it.
Yeah, I guess and it just and then in terms of the yeah, and in terms of the music, like I'd love to be able to record something where I'm proud enough to be able to share with just you guys and go, hey guys, this is what I've been trying to say for the last 20 years.
Well, then
Like,
you just keep at it until you fucking do it. You know, it's like
right, and then you guys are like, this is the worst thing I've ever.
I was like, this isn't two matching socks, buddy. The greatest song you ever wrote and recorded.
Hey, listen, I had some pretty poppy chops back then, so
That song, man, someone mentioned that the other day in some comment. They were like, two matching socks, huh? I was like, wow, nice reference.
there you go. Yep, that was listen. It's a typical 145 song.
Recorded in one take. Recorded in one take.
Yeah, we were just even what I was trying to say was the thing that we were all trying to figure out at that time. Am I good enough musically? Am I good enough for this girl? Is she gonna like me? Am I worthy of my friends' attention? Being in the band, you know, it was all that kind of stuff. That was fun. You know what? Till you mentioned that, I honestly haven't thought about that song in like 15
Oh,
years.
dude.
I completely forgot it, but I could sing the entire thing for you right now.
Yeah, I could even do all of the like all like the shit we did. Where at the end, the best part is that you're like, that is not going on the record. We're like, no, Chris is like, that's going on the record. You're like, no, it's not. We're like, that's totally going on the record. And like, that's the hidden track. And we played that, I think, one time in Nyack, New York, where that was the show where I took the side view mirror off that car on the road and then I just jetted out of Nyack. But that was a great song, man. That was a catchy ass song. So
That is a catchy ass song. It's even the track I did on the Modesty Panel one. I remember one of the nice compliments, and he may have just been saying, but Chris was like, "That was my favorite song on the album." It makes sense because it's more towards what he was playing at the style, you know, Day at the Fair. Like I recorded one track that was piano based. Basically, they were like, "Oh, you're paying, okay, you can have a track. Here you go, kid. Here's a bone."
thanks for burning your savings. I guess we'll give you a song.
Yeah, it was funny because I had taken money out to buy a piece of property in Florida. I ended up almost doing it after we started recording. The property value it went up like tenfold. A year later, I could have sold it for like 10 times the profit. And I was like, wow, that's just a punch in the balls. Because my parents bought a piece and I was going to buy another piece, which actually was a nicer piece than theirs, a little bit more expensive. And then, you know, but I had the last laugh because the property now was basically worth what today, what I would have bought it for back then, because the property values went back down.
Oh, good. Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God
Because
for
it was,
the other person that lost their hat.
yeah, after 2008, it's just like that. You know, the
Oh,
property
yeah, that's right.
crashed, you know, and it's not in like it's not like in a happening part of Florida. So, yeah, so it was like it was just funny. So I was like, yeah, no, you know what, like give it a shot. We seem to have a pretty good crew and just different things that we all sort of did. And I put a lot of the blame on myself for getting too serious per se and sort of demanding that seriousness from everybody else. And Jay was not that guy, and Brian wasn't that guy. Brian wanted to just play and hang out, and I always respected Brian for that, to be and do his own thing. That's not me, but that was kind of how it all sort of came together, you know. And then Mikey Belveduto, who was phenomenal, and I miss to this day, and I feel awful because I was basically like, "Listen, we got to pay our way," and Mikey's like, "I don't have any money," you know. I was like, "Well, we got to figure out a way to do it," and a week later, he quit. Before we even recorded and did this stuff, like I had put a damper on it by just not taking a step back and thinking, just plowing ahead. And it was funny because I sort of felt, I think you were in that space a little bit going back to Congress of Cal, and after me leaving, you were in that space, I think, where you're just like, this is what I want to do. I have a very clear vision. And listening to you and Chris talk, I'm sure maybe you sort of have some feelings that way too. Regardless, it may or may not have changed the outcome, and we will never ever know that. Nor do I particularly care at this point. It's just one of those things where, like, same sort of thing happened to me. It was this thing where I met Jay, and then we sort of do it. It was the jerk offs, and it was like, oh, this is fun, like whatever. I remember those guys, they're fun, and Doug leaving and doing all that stuff, and then going to doing what everybody else was doing in 2005, trying to get signed to a label and tour the country and do this thing, and then having all those realizations, and it's crazy. And that's the end. That's part one.
That's part one. 3.5 hours later, the part one. Stay tuned for part two, which will be 5 hours.
Where we talk about everything, including
Yeah, we actually break down our shows in Jeff's parents' basement.
I'll definitely send you the pictures. I got some pictures up in my room.
Yes.
Stuff. It's funny. I don't portray anything. Like I used to have the tapes from us and the recordings. I want to say like I had, no, the masters are from Honesty Panel. I think I have the masters for that.
But Dami's still got the masters because he just found
Okay. All right. Yeah.
the songs.
Yeah, I think I knew that. Yeah, like our first tape from Congress to Cal, I had that, and now like I can't find that anywhere. I don't know where those songs went. Yeah, because I remember the We Lift came from Chris used the bench press after one of the practices. Yeah. We had just written that song, and he's like, "Let's go We Lift," or I was like, "Let's go We Lift." That's why I wrote that in the email to you. I was like, "Yeah, maybe you remember."
Oh hell yeah, I remember that. I mean, I don't remember like I now I remember the story about that how it came about, but that song was just such a bro song. That was my favorite. Just like the mute in the beginning.
Yep.
Oh man, that's such a great fucking song. All right, dude, I'm gonna wrap this up, and then we are gonna stop. But then moving forward, obviously you should be texting me. If I was living in Jersey, I usually would have like gone out and gotten a drink, but that's 10 hours away, so that's not gonna happen just yet. All right, two questions. One, what would you like to plug? It could be anything about yourself, or you could throw some love at somebody else.
I really don't have anything.
You said some construction stuff. Like, do you do anything on the side that you can?
Yeah, I do design work for friends and family because I was like, I don't want to deal with people, and I love having the summers off. We have the kids. We're there. We're gone. We're out of here. Jersey is in the rearview mirror for 2 months for all of us. When we go up there and have a great time, and their families around all the time. Everybody comes up for a week. No electronics, no TV. I mean, it's not in the middle of nowhere, but we just do stuff as a family, which is awesome. It's just completely away from everything else. And then we all come back and recharge and go back to school and do all that stuff. So I end up doing stuff for neighbors and friends and family and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't really have anything to plug. I'm not a spokesman for anybody or anything like that.
Okay. Well, it's funny because this goes into my last question, which it sounds like you kind of started answering. So, what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
There's two things that I think I will always remember, and I sort of bring with me forever. Is the one is the DIY. Figure it out, and outside of rare things that you actually need an expert in, I can be a so-called like jack of all trades or a Jeff of all trades, if you will. Just you figure, I know a little bit about a lot, but I don't know a lot about a little, if that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of me in a nutshell. And because I have so many things that I enjoy doing, I mean, I like being artistic. I'm good at mocking and looking at something and go, that's what I want it to look like, and then figuring out how to make it look like that in like Illustrator or Photoshop. But I'm terrible at those programs because I self-taught myself. So I know the aesthetic I'm going for. I'll find something and then just copy it. But to do like original artwork and stuff, and even with like houses and decor, like I'll find a picture and go, that's what I want. And then I'll recreate it and make it look like that without spending, thousands of dollars, figuring out how do we make it look more expensive than it really is. Like the DIY, I mean, I still do the majority of stuff myself. Educating yourself and the love of education, like just because you got to figure it out and you're going to screw up so many times. And I did and do engineering, and that's a huge part of it. Like you're going to mess up so many times, and it's okay. You don't have to be perfect. And I teach a lot of the really smart kids that go to our school. I always tell them, listen, our educations are totally different. I was in a way different space than you were in high school, but we're here together now and we're going to figure it out. And you get straight A's. But if you mess something up, it's okay. Take a step back, reevaluate, move forward again. You figure it out, ask the question, sound dumb, just go, okay, then I know the answer and I never have to ask the question again. But don't feign like you know what you're talking about. That's ridiculous. I never liked people that were fake like that. And, sort of taking that and seeing things and going back to when we started and seeing the change and then having all those things happen with Modesty Panel on tour, it's just like, just be yourself and enjoy the people around you, sort of like cherish the people that are nice to you and friends with you and respect you for who you are, regardless of what your connection is. That's another thing with my students even today is like, they're from all different cultures and all different backgrounds. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Why are you going to be a jerk to be a jerk? Or why are you going to think you're better than somebody? That's ridiculous. Whether you're smarter, whether you're more handsome or more beautiful or whatever the case may be, why would you ever think or go into something or a conversation or meeting somebody just thinking that you're better than somebody or above somebody, or even if they don't agree with you, then just walk away. You don't have to be a part of it. And it's sort of those two things where it was always fun getting the acceptance after like being looked at like, who's this jock playing the drums? Oh, he actually can sort of hold the beat. Pretty cool. It's those two things that I appreciate looking back on that. And that's why I look at it so fondly. And that's why catching your podcast and listening to those two, it was like it kind of flooded back because I've sort of suppressed a lot of that stuff. And it sort of flooded back. No matter what happened, you know what, that specific time period with you and Chris, and Congress of Cal and Andy and all the kids, our friends from Jefferson, it was just, we were having fun and it was a good time. Although we would make fun of each other and be sarcastic and whatever, it was just still enjoyable to be around a group of people that was fun to be around. And that's what I kind of take from it today. And in my classes, I still try to be the sarcastic, funny person where my students will look at me and be like, who is this guy? Like, what? I thought this was supposed to be engineering class. Why is this ridiculous music playing on the speakers? And like, I'm like, listen, this is called education. Punk rock music 101. Here we go. We're doing engineering work. So, but yeah, those two things to wrap it up, because I know I've been completely verbose, and I appreciate the chance to talk to you. And I definitely will text you and move forward. But like, one of the things that always hit me was like, there was a movie called SLC Punk. Did you ever see that movie?
No, I know of it though.
Yeah, it was
Matthew Lillard in it.
yeah, Matthew Lillard was in it, whatever. And like, I remember watching with Jay, and he thought it was kind of like a little bit cheesy. You don't have to tell me that, but like, there was something at the end of that movie, and I wasn't particularly fond of the movie, and that wasn't my style and the kind of guys I hung out with. You guys weren't particularly like that, but like, I remember watching that movie, and the thing I took from the end was like, the dude was really smart. Like, his character was really smart, and he ends up becoming a lawyer, and he's like this total punked out kid. And at the end of the movie, he basically says, like, if I can't do it from the outside, I'll basically F with it from the inside. And I remember talking to Jay about that, and he's like, well, I don't need a movie to tell me like I can do that. And it was funny. Apparently I did. Like, it was that random, movie, random time, and just go like, to this day, that's how I feel. You're in it per se, and you can still keep those ethics and that time and still bring those to a younger generation, and you can mess with the system from the inside because you know how to. And that's how I feel, being a teacher today. And it's those little things where I try to make the kids laugh, and be comfortable and feel safe. And I take kind of pride in that, because that's like, because and I kind of mess with them and like, hey, just you're very good academically, but it's not your whole life. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself, you're being mentally healthy. That stuff is important. Don't freak out about like getting a B, or talk to somebody about it. Or if you're getting pressure from your parents, let's figure it out, because I don't want to see you do something bad where like it could have been changed. I teach engineering, but at the same time, I try to create a vibe of, hey, question things. It's not just what you've been told. You're 14, 15 years old. Just know, here's some life advice, whether they take it or not, at least sometimes I can make them laugh.